Chapter 1085, Full Power. Hellscythe _ Fluffy Goblin. Chapter 1085, Full Power. Groups of Blackwater members charged at Stone Forest Town's 3 magic towers. Although Blackwater couldn't destroy the towers, once they killed the players manipulating the defensive buildings, the magic towers would be useless. However, the magic towers were easily defensible and very difficult to assault. But Blackwater's elites couldn't care less. They desperately tried to force their way into the magic towers. The reason for their fervent attitude was Abandoned Wave's desperation. He had announced extraordinary rewards for the magic towers' fall. Anyone who took down the magic towers would be awarded a set of level 40 dark gold equipment as well as a bronze mount. Humans died in pursuit of wealth. Birds died in pursuit of food. The thought of such a reward had kindled a passionate light in the eyes of Blackwater's members. Only Guild's apex experts could wear a full set of level 40 dark gold equipment. As for the bronze mount, many Guild experts could only dream of obtaining their own. Furthermore, Blackwater had the numerical advantage in this war. They had more than enough people to take down the magic towers. Unfortunately, only 3 people would get to enjoy such a reward. Naturally, they had to fight with everything they had. However, this situation gave Aqua Rose, who commanded the war from inside one of the magic towers, a colossal headache. They had already expended all of their magic scrolls and large-scale destruction spells. However, like madmen, Blackwater's members continued to charge at the magic towers with complete disregard for their lives. This rapidly whittled down the number of Zero Wing members defending the structures. Big Sis Aqua, what should we do now? We have less than 100 members near our tower. The other 2 magic tower situations aren't looking too good either. At this rate, the towers will fall, Blackie asked while launching attacks at the Blackwater members that flooded the nearby streets. However, no matter how many players he killed, they couldn't seem to put a dent in the flood of Blackwater's players. On the contrary, as he fought, more players seemed to swarm the streets. Aqua Rose frowned at Blackie's report. Their group was already occupied with fending off the Red Jade Legion. They had no time to worry about the other locations. The difference between their numbers was too massive. Even with the attribute boost from the magic towers, which allowed each of Zero Wing's elite members to take on 3 Blackwater elites at a time, it was not enough. Blackwater possessed an overwhelming number of experts. Even several of Zero Wing's elite members were no match for one expert player. Guild leader, I've gathered 10,000 people to attack Zero Wing's residence. We can charge in at any time, Laughing Drunkard reported when he arrived beside Abandoned Wave. In addition, Heaven's Burial has dispatched an army of 50,000 elites to support us. It will take them roughly 10 minutes to reach Stone Forest Town. If we camp outside their resurrection temple, even if the Zero Wing members in Stone Forest Town revive, they'll only be able to watch as we secure the town. Very good. Go and destroy Zero Wing's residence, Abandoned Wave commanded. Sitting atop his warhorse, he was incredibly satisfied with the sight of the army surrounding Zero Wing's residence. Isn't Black Flame an excellent fighter? Once you destroy the residence, use the gnome cannons to bombard the secret underground room. He could not help but acknowledge that Black Flame was indeed powerful. The man had managed to defend the hallway to the secret room by himself, and both his subordinates and Pantheon's experts were helpless against him. Although they could kill him if they continued to throw players at him, Abandoned Wave was done waiting. The defending army's greatest advantage in a siege war was the ability to resurrect near the battlefield. In a war, half an hour would pass in the blink of an eye. The longer they dragged this war out, the more advantageous Zero Wing's position would be. Hence, he didn't want to waste any more time. It was not impossible to destroy a guild residence's secret underground room. Only it would be very difficult for players to do so by themselves. However, the gnome cannons could complete the task easily. Without the narrow hallway acting as a barrier, even if Feng were more powerful, he couldn't create endless duplicates of himself. They would only need 100 players to defeat him. Under Abandoned Wave's command, the 10,000 players surrounding Zero Wing's residence began to bombard the residence with attacks. Boom. Against a series of spells and arrows, the buildings inside Zero Wing's residence began to crumble, one after another. It seems that this war will end soon. What a pity. It would be great if Zero Wing had more members present. I know, right? Despite having just 20,000 members, they have lasted this long against Blackwater's army of 200,000 monsters and 100,000 plus elites. They even managed to slaughter over half of Blackwater's armies. If Zero Wing wins this war, it will qualify to be recorded within God's Domain's war history. Even if Zero Wing loses, it's still impressive. Have you ever seen any upstart guild without backing stand against the joint forces of major existences like Blackwater, Heaven's Burial and Pantheon? Although Zero Wing has lost, it was a glorious defeat. Indeed. It is unfortunate that Zero Wing's luck is so poor. If not for Blackwater, it would have only been a matter of time before it united all of Star Moon Kingdom. Players could not help but sigh as they discussed the topic. Jade, let's return to White River City. There's no point in watching the rest of this war. I just received a report stating that Heaven's Burial's vanguard has reached Stone Forest Town. It won't be long before more reinforcements arrive as well. Even if all of the dead Zero Wing members in Stone Forest Town resurrect, they cannot win this, Xianxia said as he looked at Purple Jade. However, Black Flame is quite surprising. Despite his weakened state, he defeated the Red Jade Legion's vice commander, Red Rain. Pantheon's upper echelons are discussing the matter heatedly. Red Rain lost in a one-on-one? Purple Jade could not help her shock. That can't be right. I recall that Red Rain has already reached the Void Realm. She can also reach the Battle Tower's 4th floor. Her Bloody Mary is even more tyrannical than an epic weapon, having a powerful countering effect against both NPCs and players. Even experts in the Void Realm won't fight her in a one-on-one if they can help it. How did Black Flame win against her? Purple Jade could not imagine how anyone with inferior basic attributes and weakened combat standards could defeat Red Rain. I'm not sure how either. Pantheon is keeping a tight lid on the battle videos. Our men can't get their hands on any recordings of that battle, Xianxia said, shaking his head. He was also very curious about that fight. Moreover, there weren't many battle videos that could elicit such a reaction from Pantheon. Uncle Yuan, look at Zero Wing's residence. Purple Jade suddenly said. A flood of Zero Wing members are emerging. Are they attempting a final stand? Xianxia could not help but shift his gaze to the live stream. Suddenly, several hundred players surged out of Zero Wing's destroyed residence. These people were all extraordinarily well equipped. Moreover, they were all level 40 and above, and their bodies brimmed with killing intent. The intensity of their auras could even rival the members of Pantheon's Red Jade Legion. Wait. Those are Zero Wing's main force members and Dark God's Legion members. Upon sweeping a glance over the crowd, he immediately recognized many of Zero Wing's experts. The instant these people appeared, they all activated Power of Darkness. Combined with the buff from the magic towers, their attributes could rival Lord-ranked monsters. Without hesitation, these people dove into Blackwater's elite army and began a massacre. Chapter 1086. Miracle appearing once more. Hellscythe _ Fluffy Goblin. Chapter 1086. Miracle appearing once more. Watching the flood of Zero Wing's members charge out of the destroyed residence towards them, Blackwater's members were stunned. Based on the reports they had received, Zero Wing's members in Stone Forest Town had been concentrated on the magic towers and town walls. A portion had also been dispatched to repel Pantheon's 3 legions. Hence, the guild shouldn't have any more manpower to defend its residence. Yet now several hundred players had emerged. Moreover, their weapons, equipment and levels were all top class. How could they not be shocked? However, Blackwater's members did not consider the matter over much. They currently had 10,000 players surrounding Zero Wing's residence. Among them, several hundred were expert players. With so much open space, Zero Wing could not rely on terrain to fight such a large force. Blackwater members relaxed their tense hearts as they charged to meet their enemies. In the next moment, several hundred of Blackwater's MTs raised their shields and slammed into the approaching Zero Wing members. Ping. As if they had been hit by a truck, Blackwater's forefront MTs flew through the air and crashed into the crowd of players behind them. Not only had the initial clash shattered the truth shields and protection the clerics and oracles had cast on these MTs, but the MTs' HPs also dropped considerably. Moreover, among the Zero Wing members in the frontal charge, none showed signs of grouping up to fight their enemies. Instead, they split up and squeezed their way into the Blackwater crowd before them. This caused issues for Blackwater's ranged players. After God's Domain had undergone several system upgrades, even players on the same team could damage each other with their attacks. If the ranged players launched their spells and attacks into such a cramped area, there were only two possible outcomes: either they hit their mark or they harmed their allies. To make matters worse, the Blackwater melee players couldn't stop Zero Wing members from splitting up. As if these Zero Wing members were high on drugs, they all displayed the strength of Lord-ranked monsters of the same level, with some even surpassing lords. Blackwater's army couldn't even block Zero Wing's members, much less stop them. Who are these people? As players throughout God's Domain watched this fight, they were stupefied. These several hundred Zero Wing members were too powerful. They looked like tigers pouncing on a flock of sheep. From time to time, one could see numerous Blackwater members flying through the air. This looked like a battle between superhumans and ordinary people. It was a completely one-sided slaughter. Less than a minute since the battle had begun, Blackwater's army had lost over 1,000 members. Moreover, this number rose rapidly. The massive gap in attributes and combat techniques rendered Blackwater's elite army helpless. Guild leader, these people seems to have active berserk skills. I suggest that we retreat for now and wait until their skills' durations run out. We're at a disadvantage right now, Laughing Drunkard quickly suggested. I understand. Order everyone split up. Ranged players will work to pin Zero Wing's members down. Abandoned Wave's eyes twitched with anger as he watched the massacre before him. Once their skills run out, I want them taken care of. Berserk skills were extremely rare in God's Domain. Even Blackwater, with its bountiful resources and strong influence, had only obtained a small number, and only a minority of the guild's experts had qualified to learn one. Ordinary experts should not dream of wielding their own. Yet, Zero Wing had managed to supply berserk skills to several hundred players. With just several hundred players, Zero Wing had forced Blackwater's elite army to flee like rats. This was the first time they had witnessed anything like this in God's Domain. As time passed, Blackwater suffered more casualties. In contrast, Zero Wing's several hundred players had extremely few deaths. Are Heaven's Burial's members not here yet? Abandoned Wave demanded anxiously. Normally, berserk skills should only last 2 or 3 minutes at best, yet nearly 5 minutes had gone by and Zero Wing's members still fought vigorously. On the other hand, over half of his elite army was dead. This was a nightmare. Guild leader, they've reached the town's entrance and are currently making their way here, Laughing Drunkard responded. Meanwhile, 3,000 players had gathered inside the underground first-floor hall of Zero Wing's residence. As time passed, more players joined them. Guild leader Heaven's Burial's members have reached the town. Can we start now? That's right. If we let the main force continue their slaughter, they'll steal the war's contributions. Guild leader, just say the word. We'll make those bastards from Blackwater beg for mercy. The Zero Wing elite members that had used the guild transfer scrolls to teleport to the residence were starving for action. As they hadn't been able to teleport in earlier, they had been forced to watch the war from so far away. Even though their allies were being slaughtered, they hadn't been able to do anything to help. The building frustration had been intolerable. If not for the guild's upper echelons stopping them from running to Stone Forest Town, they would have braved the journey. Instead of responding to his guild members, Feng contacted Aqua Rose and asked, Aqua, can you see Heaven's Burial's members yet? They've already arrived. They are headed towards the guild residence. Initial estimates put their numbers above 30,000, Aqua Rose reported. Nodding, Feng smiled and said, Excellent. Your teams can retreat. Try to lure as many people to the residence as possible. Lure them over? Aqua Rose was somewhat confused. Although she knew that the seal on the town had been lifted, the guild residence's wide, open space was not a strategic location for a battle. However, Aqua Rose couldn't care less. The Red Jade Legion before her was simply too powerful. Even though everyone from the Dark Gods Legion had activated their berserk skills, many of the Red Jade Legion's members had their own. If they continued to clash with the Red Jade Legion, it was only a matter of time before they were annihilated. Guild Leader Wave, I've made you wait. Singular Burial, who rode a horned lizard that was over 2 meters tall, greeted as he slowly approached Abandoned Wave. On his way here he had heard plenty of news about the battle in Stone Forest Town. He had rejoiced when he heard the reports. He inwardly celebrated the fact that he had not led his guild and joined the initial assault on Stone Forest Town. Otherwise, Heaven's Burial's fate would have been far worse than Blackwater's. Just as Abandoned Wave was about to respond to Singular Burial, he discovered a change in the man's face. Right now, Singular Burial wore an incomparably gloomy expression. Seeing Singular Burial's ill complexion, Abandoned Wave asked curiously, Guild Leader Burial. Now that Heaven's Burial's vanguard army had arrived, victory was within their reach. It was also only a matter of time before Heaven's Burial's remaining army arrived. Right now, Singular Burial should be quite pleased, not wearing such an ugly look. I just received news that the seal on Stone Forest Town has been destroyed. Singular Burial explained awkwardly. You're saying Zero Wing has lifted the seal on Stone Forest Town? Abandoned Wave immediately paled. With the seal lifted, Zero Wing could send an endless stream of reinforcements into Stone Forest Town. They had exhausted so much effort to annihilate most of Zero Wing's 20,000 members defending Stone Forest Town. If another 40 or 50,000 joined the fray. Wait, something's not right. Stone Forest Town's seal should have lifted quite some time ago. Why are so few of them here right now? Singular Burial suddenly felt as if something were amiss when he glanced at the empty Zero Wing residence. However, as soon as he finished speaking, he felt the threat of death wash over him. Singular Burial wasn't the only one to experience the feeling. All of the players within Zero Wing's residence felt it as well. Moreover, this feeling grew more intense as the seconds ticked by. Boom. Suddenly, the ground beneath Zero Wing's residence exploded, and a tall tower emerged from the ruins. When this tower appeared, everyone felt as if they were suffocating. This tower was none other than the obelisk Feng had unsealed when he had first captured Stone Forest Town. Chapter 1087. Zero Wing's Strength. Hellscythe _ Fluffy Goblin. Chapter 1087 Zero Wing's Strength. A tower. Why is there a tower here? Everyone in Stone Forest Town stared incredulously at the obelisk that had suddenly emerged in the middle of Zero Wing's residence. The obelisk was several hundred meters tall. Even the Tier 4 mythic monsters looked no different than children before the obelisk. The instant the obelisk appeared, the cold hand of fear touched the hearts of all players within Stone Forest Town. Before anyone realized it, dark clouds covered the sky above the town. In the blink of an eye, elemental rain began to fall, scattering a mist over the town. This is elementalization. Magical class players who were familiar with elemental mana immediately recognized the mist's true identity, and they couldn't help their growing excitement. The town's players also felt their minds clear like never before. They felt their perspectives widen. If they could train in such a mana-dense environment, it wouldn't take long for them to improve by leaps and bounds. However, unlike the rest of the players, Abandoned Wave, Peerless, and Singular Burial did not show any excitement despite the thickening mist. Rather, they had noticed a 5-fold magic array looming in the sky, enveloping the town. The instant the 5-fold magic array appeared, the mana it gathered sent a shudder through every player's soul. Crap. This is a trap. Singular Burial could not help but recall Zero Wing's initial capture of Stone Forest Town, and the monstrous summoned NPC that destroyed the Star Alliance. Thinking up to this point, chills crawled down Singular Burial's spine. If that monster appeared once more, the consequences would be unimaginable. A trap? Originally, Abandoned Wave hadn't been sure about his guess. However, upon seeing Singular Burial's pale complexion, he was certain. Immediately, he turned to Singular Burial and asked, "Can you tell me what is going on?" Now that he was so close to obtaining Stone Forest Town, he could not give up. He had sacrificed too much to dominate Stone Forest Town. He no longer had the option to retreat. Since he couldn't flee, he needed to get a clear idea of the trap they had just fallen into. He needed to implement appropriate countermeasures. Meanwhile, Peerless, who stood beside the two, grew curious. What, exactly, could frighten the almighty guild leader of Heaven's Burial to such a degree? There's no time. If we don't leave this instant, it will be too late. Singular Burial casually responded. Hurriedly, he began shouting through the regional guild chat. Everyone withdraw from Stone Forest Town immediately. Unfortunately, a few moments after Singular Burial issued this command, a translucent purple barrier began to form around Stone Forest Town. The barrier swallowed the town as well as some of the land outside its border. The instant this barrier appeared, fear surfaced on the monsters' faces outside of the town. Ignoring the bandaged man's commands, these monsters turned and fled. The monsters that had been caught within the purple barrier were not as fortunate. Even level 66 Grandlords attacked the barrier desperately, yet the barrier remained intact. The barrier did not even shudder under the powerful assault. Shit. We can't get out. When the players in saw how firm the magic barrier stood, despite the attacks it received, they started to panic, their previous joy disappearing completely. Meanwhile, outside Stone Forest Town, the war spectators could no longer see inside the town. Because these live streams were recorded from a safe distance outside of the town, all they could see was a large dome over Stone Forest Town. What did Zero Wing do? Yuan Tianxin felt an indescribable shock as he stared at the purple dome. As one of the secret pavilion's upper echelons, he usually studied God's domain thoroughly. He knew just how terrifying a five-fold magic array was. This was something that could not even be found in Empire's imperial palaces. Generally, one only encountered such an array in divine ruins. Even Tier 5 NPCs were forced to avoid five-fold magic arrays, much less current players. Suddenly, Yuan Tianxin felt that his view of Zero Wing blur once again. After the magic barrier surrounded Stone Forest Town, elite and expert players began to swarm out of Zero Wing's residence, their numbers far exceeding everyone's expectations. In less than a moment, over 10,000 Zero Wing members had joined the battle. Moreover, this number was still rapidly climbing. 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. As players watched, 50,000 Zero Wing members exited Zero Wing's partially destroyed guild hall. Even the weakest among them were guild elites. Damn it! It really is a trap. Rage burned in Singular Burial's gaze as he looked at the newly emerged army of 50,000 elite players. Although Blackwater, Heaven's Burial and Pantheon's combined force was still larger than Zero Wing's, the gap had shortened. At this moment, their combined armies barely outnumbered Zero Wing's by 2-1. However, Zero Wing's elite members received the Magic Tower's buff. These elites' basic attributes surpassed their elite members by a large margin. In a head-on clash, they would not have any advantage whatsoever. Haha. Look at the ugly expressions on Blackwater's faces. I want to see how long they last now that we've closed the gap. They actually dare to pick a fight with Zero Wing while most of us are away. I'll be damned if I don't camp their corpses until tomorrow. There's no point in camping their corpses. They'll resurrect in Simu Town after they die. Instead, we should let our healers resurrect them and kill them again. Let's make them drop every item they have. The Zero Wing members that had just emerged from the residence brimmed with fighting spirit as they grinned at Blackwater and Heaven's Burial's members. Guild leader, all available elite members have arrived. Blackie reported, pride growing in his heart as he watched the army of 50,000 elite players. It was hard to imagine that, in just a few months, Zero Wing had grown from an insignificant guild to contesting for the position of #1 guild in Starmoon Kingdom. Excitedly, Blackie said, as long as you give the word, I'll lead our brothers to exterminate Blackwater and Heaven's Burial. All right. It's about time we show them Zero Wing's true power, Feng said, nodding. Suddenly he shouted, all units listen up. Leave none of them alive. Upon hearing this, Zero Wing's members charged at Blackwater and Heaven's Burial's armies without any hesitation. The obelisk was the Awakened's prison. However, the crystal ball inside had more than its sealing ability. Only the crystal ball's other abilities were considerably costly. For example, the five-fold magic array enveloping the town had cost a whopping 18 mana stones to activate. In addition, the magic array had an extremely long cooldown. Once used, it could only be used again after a full month. Meanwhile, the magic array only lasted 10 hours. During this period, people could only enter Stone Forest Town. Leaving the town would be impossible until the array's duration ended, or it was deactivated. As for destroying the magic barrier, that was beyond current players. Meanwhile, the white mist in the town strengthened allies, granting them an extraordinary calm and helping them improve their skill completion rate. In contrast, enemy forces' senses were dulled. Enemy players' field of vision in particular would be greatly limited. If a player's field of vision were too narrow, they could easily fall prey to ambushes. As the battle began, Blackwater and Heaven's Burial's members were bombarded by various ranged attacks, yet when they tried to retaliate, they couldn't locate their attackers. They could only stand there dumbfounded under the bombardment. In just the first wave of attacks, Blackwater and Heaven's Burial had suffered over 1,000 casualties. Against Zero Wing's elite members, even Blackwater and Heaven's Burial's experts had trouble in a one-on-one fight, not to mention the guild's elite members. Nobody could have imagined that the battle would become so one-sided. In less than 15 minutes, Blackwater and Heaven's Burial had lost over 10,000 members in total. On the other hand, Zero Wing had only lost several hundred. Moreover, these several hundred Zero Wing elites had traded their lives for the lives of Blackwater's and Heaven's Burial's experts. Watching Blackwater's members die in troves, Abandoned Wave sent Feng a hateful glare before reluctantly commanding through the guild chat, "We retreat." Defeated. He had been miserably defeated. He had never imagined that his long-cultivated plan would end like this. Chapter 1088. Legendary Existence. Hellscythe _ Fluffy Goblin. Chapter 1088. Legendary Existence. When Abandoned Wave issued the command, a powerless look graced his face. However, this command allowed the players fighting Zero Wing to release a sigh of relief. This wasn't a battle. It was simply a one-sided massacre. Not only were their basic attributes lower than Zero Wing's members, but their senses were also disrupted. Despite having more people on their side, they were helpless against Zero Wing. Guild leader, they're starting to withdraw to the north. Should we hunt them down? Aqua Rose also sighed with relief when she saw Blackwater's and Heaven's Burial's members retreat. This war hadn't been an easy one. It was definitely the most thrilling war she had participated in since she had started playing virtual reality games. If not for Feng's preparations, revealing one trump card after another to foil Blackwater's assault as well as dispatching Fire Dance to remove the seal over the town, Blackwater would have secured this war's victory. Despite dispatching so many elite players and the support of the Magic Towers and Obelisk, Zero Wing had only taken 20,000 enemy lives after much difficulty. In exchange, they had lost 3,000 lives. Blackwater and Heaven's Burial's power was obvious. Moreover, Pantheon's core legions had also taken part in this war. If not for Zero Wing's home ground advantage, the war's outcome might not have been certain. Chase after them. Kill as many as we can, Feng commanded without hesitation. This war had given Feng an understanding of just how powerful Blackwater was. Despite Blackwater's short time in God's domain, it already possessed such combat power and foundations. If Blackwater were allowed to continue, Feng even doubted that he could defend Stone Forest Town. Hence, he needed to deal a harsh blow to Blackwater and Heaven's Burial in this war. If they annihilated the guild's armies now, Zero Wing could continue to develop safely for a considerable amount of time. He would also have more time to prepare for his city's construction. A city's construction was different from that of a town. Not only did it cost more, but it was also more difficult to defend than Stone Forest Town. Most importantly, he had already used the Magic Tower design 3 times. Of the 2 remaining Magic Towers he could construct, he had promised one for the Town of Beginnings. He'd be dreaming if he thought he could defend a city with a single magic tower. Upon hearing Feng's command, every member of Zero Wing charged at the scattering Blackwater's and Heaven's Burial members. This was a good opportunity to earn guild contribution points. Many of the systems and benefits Zero Wing offered required a certain amount of GCPs. Promotions also required GCPs. GCPs had become particularly important after Stone Forest Town's battle arena had appeared. One could normally only gain GCPs by completing quests or trading in good equipment or items. However, there was a limit to the GCPs that could be obtained through these methods. It was only during guild wars that GCPs could be earned without a limit. How could they pass up this opportunity? Zero Wing is despicable. We're already retreating, yet they're chasing us down. Singular Burial could not help but curse. Among the remaining players in the Blackwater Heavens Burial army, the majority consisted of Heavens Burial's members. Blackwater's army had mostly been wiped out. Even if more were killed, it would not make much of a difference. However, things were different for Heavens Burial. Although their losses during their escape would be fewer than a direct clash with Zero Wing's forces, they still lost several hundred players with each passing minute. Elite players were not as readily available as ordinary players. Elite players were a guild's backbone. If Heaven's Burial lost so many of its elite players here, it would wound the guild's development. The guild may even stagnate. However, regardless of how many times Singular Burial cursed, Heaven's Burial's members died by the dozens. Very quickly, over half of Heaven's Burial's 50,000 elite army had been lost. As Zero Wing's members continued to massacre Blackwater and Heaven's Burial's members, Feng received a call request from an extremely familiar ID. Endless Scars. Feng's expression tensed when he saw this name. Why is she contacting me? We shouldn't have any connections. Endless Scars had been a rather mysterious female expert in Feng's previous life. Aside from her name and battle records, nobody knew anything about her. Many players had recognized her as a legend among independent players. Many super guilds had even tried to recruit the woman, offering her all sorts of astronomical prices. However, the latter ignored these offers, operating alone. Surprisingly, none of these super guilds tried to cause Endless Scars any trouble. Endless Scars had become a legend due to her battle records against one higher-tiered opponent after another. First, she fought Tier 4 opponents as a Tier 3 player. Afterward, she fought Tier 5 opponents as a Tier 4 player. One of her most impressive battle records was of a fight with a Tier 6 God-ranked expert as a Tier 5 player. Tier 6 was a massive turning point for players. Any expert that reached this rank had peaked in almost all aspects. Yet, Endless Scars had successfully defeated a Tier 6 God-ranked expert. After that battle, she became the #1 expert on the God's Domain experts list of the time. Everyone had assumed that this goddess would continue her legend in God's Domain. However, Endless Scars had suddenly disappeared from the public eye. Many throughout God's Domain had speculated about her disappearance. Feng had never imagined that such an existence would seek him out. Feng immediately accepted the call. Hello, my name is Endless Scars. You may also refer to me as Ling Jingxian. I am a representative of the Blackwater Corporation. Ling Jingxian introduced herself, her voice crisp and pleasing, which made her difficult to hate. Although he hadn't reacted visibly, Feng's heart pounded madly when he heard this introduction. To think that this legendary player would be a representative from the Blackwater Corporation. Feng finally understood why none of the various super guilds had issued sanctions against Endless Scars after she rejected their offers. With such a powerful backer, of course, the various super guilds wouldn't move against her. Seeing as Miss Jingxian has contacted me, are you perhaps trying to convince me to show mercy to Blackwater's people? Feng asked, laughing. As one of the Blackwater Corporation's representatives, Ling Jingxian would care about the Blackwater Guild's development. If all of the Blackwater Guild's elite members died here, the guild would undoubtedly stagnate. That's right. Doing so would benefit us both. Ling Jingxian did not bother to hide her intentions. Instead, she chuckled lightly, acting as if this matter wasn't important to her in the least. Miss Jingxian, I have received your message of goodwill. If there is nothing else, I'll end the call now, Feng said nonchalantly. If you continue to force Abandoned Wave into a corner, he might decide to take you down with him. If that happens, Stone Forest Town will have no ruler. Feng's instant rejection surprised Ling Jingxian slightly. The reports she had received had described his personality to a T. Immediately she explained, I am not saying this without basis. You know that Abandoned Wave is capable of controlling that monster army, right? Those monsters have yet to enter the town because Abandoned Wave is afraid of those monsters polluting the town with evil energy, making the area inhospitable for players. If you continue to pursue Blackwater's members, he might release the monster army into Stone Forest Town. If that happens, everyone will lose. Evil energy? Feng seemed to recall something similar. Any area that the evil god's evil energy polluted became uninhabitable for players. If players were in these polluted areas for long periods, the evil energy would infect them as well. If that happened, the consequences would be extremely severe. This was precisely the reason that the evil god's temple was the human race's common enemy. Evil energy cannot be dispelled. If you let the remaining Blackwater members go, I can assure you that Abandoned Wave will not allow the monster army into Stone Forest Town. May I know your decision, Guild Leader Black Flame? Ling Jingxian asked, smiling at Feng's poker face on the screen. At this point, Blackwater had suffered a devastating blow. Even if it were not exterminated, it would not be capable of causing Zero Wing any trouble for some time. In her opinion, Feng had no other choice. At the end of the day, Stone Forest Town was an important revenue source for Zero Wing. Losing Stone Forest Town was the equivalent to chopping off Zero Wing's arms. Thank you for your offer, Miss Jingxian. Again, if there is nothing else, I will disconnect the call now, Feng replied in the same manner as before. Without waiting for Ling Jingxian to respond, he ended the call. Chapter 1089, Feng's Madness. Hellscythe _ Fluffy Goblin. Chapter 1089, Feng's Madness. He rejected the offer. Ling Jingxian blinked in astonishment as she stared at the black, translucent screen before her. She hadn't expected Feng to be so decisive. What an interesting person. Ling Jingxian chuckled as she shook her head. So be it. It's just a pity that we'll lose Stone Forest Town. Following which, Ling Jingxian forwarded Feng's reply to Abandoned Wave. Her message was very straightforward, the contents simply stating that Zero Wing had rejected their offer. After Ling Jingxian finished sending her message, a female cleric looking to be in her early 20s walked over and said, "Big Sis Endless, we've found the hidden path leading to the ruins core. Only the monster guarding it is a level 60 Grand Lord. Leader has called for you to discuss a raid plan." If Feng were present, he would notice that the female cleric wore Light of the Forsaken, a level 45 dark gold set equipment for clerics. It was a 6-piece set that only dropped from level 50 and above field Great Lords. Meanwhile, the cleric wearing the set was only level 41. Alright, I'll head over right now. Ling Jingxian smiled and nodded. She then followed the female cleric deeper into the ruins. The Zero Wing members in Stone Forest Town rushed madly at their enemies, while Blackwater and Heaven's Burial's armies ran and hid wherever they could, suffering immense losses in the process. As for Pantheon's 3 legions, they held their ground in an easily defensible corner. However, although they had managed to lower their casualty rate, it was only a matter of time before they were wiped out. Watching his guild members die one after another, Singular Burial could not help but ask anxiously, "Brother Wave, what did Black Flame say?" The purple barrier still enveloped the town. Players could only enter the town, not leave. No matter what methods they used, they were utterly helpless against the magic barrier. If this continued, the 50,000 elite members he had worked so hard to nurture would vanish like bubbles. After Abandoned Wave received Ling Jingxian's message, he was dazed for a long moment. Murmuring, he said, "He rejected. Has Black Flame lost his mind?" Singular Burial was stunned when he heard this. He had experienced an area polluted by evil energy personally. Players could not reside in those areas for long. If those monsters invaded Stone Forest Town, it would cripple the town. Stone Forest Town was Zero Wing's main source of income. How could the guild choose to give it up so easily? Black Flame really is decisive. He is actually willing to sacrifice an entire town to defeat the last of our troops. I have underestimated him, Peerless said, astonished. If he is even this ruthless to himself, it seems our defeat is not without reason. Ruthless? Abandoned Wave laughed. Since he is so eager to die, I'll fulfill his wish. His defeat in this war was already certain. It was impossible to obtain Stone Forest Town. Moreover, after suffering such a miserable defeat, nothing good waiting for him upon his return to the guild. He was more than willing to drag Stone Forest Town with him as he fell. Moreover, if Zero Wing lost Stone Forest Town, its development would slow significantly. He might even have a chance to redeem himself. He had only asked Ling Jingxian to contact Black Flame to appease Pantheon and Heaven's Burial. In reality, he hoped that Zero Wing would reject his offer. He had never imagined that Zero Wing would be this foolish. Following which, Abandoned Wave contacted the bandaged man. You can make your move now. Let the monsters enter the town. Destroy as much as you can. Our previous agreement still stands. This is your decision, not mine. I'll gratefully accept Stone Forest Town. Hearing Abandoned Wave resolution, a hint of excitement flashed in the bandaged man's eyes. He was like a starving beast that had suddenly spotted an innocent sheep. Immediately, the bandaged man commanded his remaining monsters to charge into Stone Forest Town. The 3 mythic monsters even joined the fray. Guild leader, this is bad. The 3 mythic monsters are trying to charge into the town. Alluring Summer hurriedly reported as she tried her best to stop the crazed mythic monsters. However, the evil earth dragons began to act differently. No longer controlled, their basic attributes instantly increased by 15%. Most importantly, their intelligence was no longer suppressed. Despite Alluring Summer's divine dragon having superior attributes, she was barely able to hold back 2 of the earth dragons. She was helpless to stop the third. As a Tier 4 mythic monster, the evil earth dragon was extremely fast. In less than 10 seconds, it had reached Stone Forest Town's defensive walls. Roar. Bellowing angrily, the evil earth dragon, that stood over 100 meters tall, shattered the wall before it with a single swipe of its claws. As for the town's level 65 NPC guards, they were nothing before the evil earth dragon. No one could stop the mythic monster as it charged into the town. Although some players had tried to stop the monster, the earth dragon took them out with one swipe of its massive tail. In addition, the attack devastated the surrounding terrain. Seeing this, Zero Wing's members were stupefied. Even after activating Protection Blessing, just one of the evil earth dragon's normal attacks had killed a level 40 guardian knight with nearly 30,000 HP instantly. Meanwhile, the instant the evil earth dragon entered the town, the monster's body began to exude a gray fog that slowly spread. As the gray fog passed, the ground dried up as if its vitality had been devoured. Haha. With this, Blackwater's victory is a guarantee. Hooray for the guild leader. Blackwater's members jumped in celebration as the evil earth dragon arrived. Although Zero Wing had a lot of players, they did not have anyone who could contend with a mythic monster. They could only watch as the monster destroyed their town. A Tier 4 mythic monster is really powerful. Though it's a pity that we'll lose Stone Forest Town forever, Singular Burial said, sighing. Previously, he had not had a chance to observe the evil earth dragons up close. However, now that he witnessed one in action, he finally understood just how frightening Tier 4 monsters were. They were definitely not existences current players could challenge. Aqua, tell everyone to use their return scrolls to leave Stone Forest Town right now, Feng said to Aqua Rose, who stood beside him as he watched the evil earth dragon rampage inside his town. Following which, he dashed towards the top of the obelisk. Unlike other magic barriers, the magic barrier enveloping the town did not isolate or hinder allies. Hence, Zero Wing's members could use their return scrolls at any time. We're leaving. Feng's decision confused Aqua Rose. However, after giving it some thought, she realized that they didn't have anyone present that could take care of the evil earth dragon. They would simply be throwing their lives away if they remained. It was better to return to White River City. In any case, with the presence of the evil energy, Stone Forest Town was finished. Following which, Aqua Rose notified Zero Wing's members to withdraw from Stone Forest Town. Haha. They're retreating. Seems even Black Flame fears something. Abandoned Wave was quite pleased as he watched Zero Wing's members abandon the town. Although he had not obtained Stone Forest Town, Zero Wing wouldn't have it either. In other words, this war had ended in a draw, with neither side having an advantage. When the evil earth dragon reached the obelisk, it released a powerful roar as its eyes locked onto the only zero-wing member left in Stone Forest Town, Feng. Meanwhile, Feng, who stood on the obelisk's peak, unsheathed Killing Ray and swung the sacred sword at the gigantic crystal before him. Ping! The crystal split in half on the spot. Immediately, black fog began to seep from the crystal's two halves, gradually forming into the figure of a person. A short moment later, an effeminate youth wearing long blood-red robes with hair scattered over his shoulders appeared. This youth was none other than the awakened the obelisk had imprisoned. Lancelot, awakened High Elf. Level? HP? / No wonder he didn't die even after imprisoned for such a long time. So he's a High Elf. Realization dawned as Feng looked at the effeminate youth. Elves had a much longer lifespan than humans. Moreover, they were naturally gifted with the ability to manipulate the magical elements. Spells in their hands could move as if they had a life of their own. If the current Lancelot were not in his soul form, he only needed to flick a finger to turn Stone Forest Town to ash. However, even the current Lancelot should be provoked. He was capable of taking over other NPCs' bodies. Moreover, he became more powerful with each time his seal was lifted. The NPC he took possession of would also become incredibly difficult to deal with. Feng hadn't wanted to release Lancelot. However, to exterminate Blackwater's remaining monsters, he had been forced to take this risk. Chapter 1090. Awakened vs. Evil Earth Dragons. Chapter 1090. Awakened vs. Evil Earth Dragons. As Lancelot appeared, Feng lost control of the magic barrier surrounding Stone Forest Town. Instead, the magic barrier automatically began to suppress Lancelot's soul. The mana flowing out of the magic barrier increased by numerous times. Even the mythic-ranked evil earth dragons started to fear the magic array as they unconsciously retreated. Shortly after, Lancelot glanced at Feng. However, at this point the mana from the magic barrier already suppressed him. Immediately, Lancelot vanished from Feng's view as he flew to occupy a Tier 1 NPC elementalist. I should leave now. Feng could not help but sigh with relief when Lancelot left. Although Lancelot was only a soul, the NPC possessed the power to damage and kill other living creatures. Lancelot would have no problem killing a weakened Tier 1 player like himself. If Lancelot had a physical body, he'd likely kill Feng instantly. Now that the seal had been broken, the magic barrier had begun to dissipate naturally. Players inside the barrier were no longer restricted and could leave the barrier anytime they wanted. Without hesitation, Feng activated space movement and distanced himself from Stone Forest Town. Meanwhile, the independent players watching the war from outside of Stone Forest Town could finally see the situation inside. Is that Stone Forest Town? Everyone's jaws dropped when they saw the town's current state. Instead of a thriving town, they saw a wasteland. Collapsed buildings littered the town. Potholes and cracks covered its streets. However, the player corpses that filled the streets shocked the spectators the most. This was the first time they had seen anything so tragic. The magic barrier is gone. Singular Burial's frown relaxed as he watched the magic barrier vanish. However, after recalling the current state of his army, his hatred for Zero Wing intensified. Based on his current estimates, his elite army's death toll exceeded 35,000. Of his 50,000-strong elite army, less than 15,000 people remained. After losing so many elite players, Heaven's Burial's development would undoubtedly stagnate for a time. The most abhorrent thing was that, even after losing so many troops, he had obtained nothing whatsoever. Moreover, Zero Wing's opportunistic members had looted over half of weapons and equipment Heaven's Burial and Blackwater's members had dropped. Not only hadn't they profited from this war, but they had also lost far more than expected. Damn it! Why is Black Flame so willing to part with his town? Abandoned Wave ground his teeth as he watched Feng leave the town through a spatial tear. At this moment he even doubted that Feng was human. Feng had sacrificed Stone Forest Town, yet he wasn't willing to go down with it. Let's leave as well. The evil energy here is growing denser. Peerless also could not help but sigh when he saw Feng disappear. He then commanded the members of Pantheon's 3 core legions to leave Stone Forest Town. However, as everyone began to activate their return scrolls, a figure appeared in the sky, chanting an incantation. Immediately, a 3-fold magic array slowly formed above Stone Forest Town. What kind of NPC is that? He can actually float in the sky. Everyone was surprised when they noticed the NPC Lancelot had possessed. This is bad. NPCs capable of hovering in the air are at least tier 4. Everyone get out of there. Singular Burial's expression tensed when he saw Lancelot. Ordinary players might not know how significant hovering in the air might be, but as the leader of a guild, Singular Burial knew what that ability represented. This signified that Lancelot was a tier 4 NPC at the very minimum. Otherwise, he had no way of learning the super-rare tier 4 spell Hover. If the enemy were simply a tier 4 mythic monster, he would not be particularly worried. However, the new opponent was a magical class NPC. As a tier 4 magical class NPC, Lancelot knew many tier 4 spells. Among them, there were definitely tier 4 large-scale destruction spells. If he used those spells, slaughtering these players would be child's play. Peerless had also begun to notify his men, instructing them to escape Stone Forest Town quickly. Foolish ants, cease your resistance and let me devour you. Lancelot, who now had a physical body, overlooked Stone Forest Town, a hint of madness flashing in his eyes as he began to laugh. Suddenly, Lancelot pointed a finger towards the sky, and pitch-black ripples radiated into the surroundings. Any players that these black ripples enveloped were interrupted and could no longer use their return scrolls. Moreover, the spell's range was more than double that of the obelisk's magic barrier. Instantly, the black ripples enveloped Stone Forest Town. Even the monsters outside of the town failed to escape. After the black ripples touched everyone in the town, they felt as if something or someone dragged them as their bodies involuntarily moved closer to Lancelot. An Awaken's tier 4 spell, Dark Gravitation, is so much more powerful. Feng was speechless when he saw the black ripples range. Fortunately, he had traveled far enough from Stone Forest Town. Otherwise, he would be among those being dragged towards Lancelot right now. Although awakened NPCs and mutants were somewhat similar, the former was unmatched in skill and spell utilization. Hence, awakened NPCs were invincible among those of the same tier and level. They were even capable of challenging opponents of a higher tier. Even a tier 6 god couldn't kill a tier 5 awakened like Lancelot, and in the end, could only imprison the latter and pray that time would wear the high elf down. What did Black Flame do? Fear surfaced on Abandoned Wave's expression. Even if he were a fool, he could tell that Feng was related to this situation. However, no matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't break free from the power pulling his body. He could only watch as he gravitated towards Lancelot. This won't do. We can't resist this spell at all. We need the evil earth dragons to get rid of that NPC. Peerless hurriedly told Abandoned Wave. Even after activating his berserk skill, he was dragged towards Lancelot. Current players couldn't contend with a tier 4 NPC. The 3 evil earth dragons were their only hope. As they were also tier 4, even if the evil earth dragons were slightly weaker than the NPC, there were 3 of them. Combined with players and the other tier 3 monsters' attacks, it might be possible to kill the tier 4 NPC. If they could kill such a powerful tier 4 NPC, based on God's domain settings, they might obtain some powerful items that could make up for the losses they had suffered. Upon Peerless' reminder, Abandoned Wave hurriedly contacted the bandaged man. The evil earth dragons were level 65, and after using an advanced identification skill, Abandoned Wave discovered that Lancelot was only level 70. To tier 4 monsters, a difference of 5 levels was practically negligible. Lancelot, Awakened High Elf Great Wizard, level 70 HP 73, 000, 000/73, 000,000. In terms of HP, Lancelot definitely surpassed NPCs of the same tier and level. However, he didn't have as much as the level 65 evil earth dragons. Kill that NPC. Abandoned Wave commanded. Immediately, with the 3 evil earth dragons taking the lead, both monster and player armies began desperately attacking Lancelot. Chapter 1091. Taking Advantage of Others' Misfortune. Chapter 1091. Taking Advantage of Others' Misfortune. Lancelot looked like an ant before the three evil earth dragons. It seemed as if a single slap was more than enough to take his life. Roar. The three evil earth dragons activated their evil roar skills simultaneously, firing 3 gray beams at Lancelot. As the evil earth dragon's specialty skill, their evil roars had a very wide range. If struck, even mythic monsters of the same level would receive significant damage. Their combat powers might even weaken. The players watching from a distance felt chills crawl down their spines when they saw the 3 gray beams. They finally understood why the tens of thousands of players that had attempted to raid Black Ridge Town had suffered such a miserable defeat. It wouldn't matter how many players attacked the town. Against such a skill, all would die instantly. Boom. The 3 beams of light converged into a single point, creating a deafening explosion. Despite the explosion occurring in the air, the resulting shockwave nearly sent the players inside the town flying. Black Flame, do you think a single Tier 4 NPC can defeat us? Abandoned Wave gleefully demanded. Although they had lost Stone Forest Town and their war with Zero Wing ended in a draw, every player throughout Starmoon Kingdom would know of Blackwater now that it had displayed its power. The guild would have no issues recruiting elite and expert players in the future. Blackwater would quickly recover its losses. But what about Zero Wing? Without Stone Forest Town, the Candlelight Trading Firm would be Zero Wing's only source of income. The trading firm's meager profits could never sustain a guild of Zero Wing's size. Moreover, Zero Wing could only operate around White River City. How could its development speed possibly compete with Blackwater's? The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had also suppressed Zero Wing's expansion into the Black Dragon Empire. Hence, it was only a matter of time before Blackwater surpassed Zero Wing. By then he would remove Zero Wing's name from Starmoon Kingdom permanently. Guild leader, look. Just as Abandoned Wave's hope rekindled, Laughing Drunkard's eyes widened as he looked towards the sky, shock flashing in his gaze. Still hovering in the air, Lancelot was unharmed. A 5-layer ice barrier shattered and fell to the ground piece by piece. He's unharmed. How is he so powerful? Is this a Tier 4 NPC? The spectating crowd gasped when they saw this, their hearts nearly skipping a beat. A single evil roar could easily wipe out thousands of players or heavily injure a Grand Lord of the same level, yet Lancelot emerged unscathed after taking 3 of these attacks. Everyone was confused. Why was there such a huge disparity in strength between these Tier 4 existences? Continue the attacks. He must have used a life-saving skill. He won't be able to use it repeatedly. The outcome also surprised Abandoned Wave. However, he had a more complete view of the situation. The greatest difference between NPCs and monsters was their skill strength. Otherwise, how could NPCs challenge monsters of the same tier? As Abandoned Wave had guessed, the 5-layered ice mirror was a Tier 4 Great Wizard's life-saving skill. The skill could not be used again within a short time. Moreover, the skill had a very short duration of only 10 seconds. Immediately, tens of thousands of spells and arrows flew towards Lancelot. However, Lancelot was too small a target. Only several hundred attacks actually struck the NPC. In response, Lancelot stretched out his hand and swiped it across the empty space before him. Suddenly, a light blue magic shield appeared around him, releasing a dazzling, eye-catching glow. When the spells and arrows met the magic shield, it was as if they had crashed into adamantite. The magic shield remained intact even after receiving the hundreds of attacks. By the time the first wave of attacks ended, Lancelot had finished chanting the incantation for the Tier 4 spell, Earth Pulsation. The spell had an effective radius of 300 yards. Upon the spell's activation, the ground in the affected area shattered. Over 1,000 players died on the spot. Monsters beneath Lord rank were also killed. Immediately after, Lancelot swung his hand again. Clouds of dark smoke rose from Earth Pulsation's affected area and flew towards Lancelot. This dark smoke was comprised of the slain players' souls. Nothing nourished Lancelot more than players' immortal souls. As Lancelot absorbed the dark smoke, pleasure lit his expression. His aura also grew slightly stronger. He can absorb souls. When Abandoned Wave witnessed this familiar scene, fear flashed in his eyes. Immortal souls were extremely important to players. If a player's immortal soul were absorbed, the penalty could range anywhere from being unable to log into the game for several days to permanent death. In the latter scenario, players would have no choice but to start a new account. When Peerless and Singular Burial heard Abandoned Wave's words, they similarly paled. They were not ordinary players. They had a general understanding of immortal souls. If this NPC absorbed all of their present guild members' souls, the consequences would be devastating. Yet the powerful gravitational force continued to drag them closer to Lancelot. They couldn't escape the NPC at all. It seems I'll have to give them some hints. Feng could not help but laugh when he saw these players' despair. Immediately he anonymously published a message on the official forums, mentioning that he knew Lancelot's weakness. However, the information would cost 10,000 magic crystals. Although his asking price was slightly high, if it could save tens of thousands of elite players and experts from losing their immortal souls, Blackwater and Heaven's Burial would buy the information without hesitation. As for letting Lancelot eliminate Blackwater and Heaven's Burial's members, that was not Feng's goal. If Lancelot absorbed these players' souls, even Feng would be helpless against the NPC. Moreover, he would truly lose Stone Forest Town. This was not his desired outcome. His best option was to ensure that both sides suffered immense losses. Of course, if Blackwater had not possessed the 3 evil earth dragons, there would be no point in sharing Lancelot's weakness. In the past, Lancelot's seal had been removed a total of 3 times. Unlike the first time the seal had been released, imprisoning Lancelot by repairing the sealing crystal had been impossible after his second release. They had beaten Lancelot within an inch of his life before he could be resealed. If players wanted to suppress Lancelot, they needed someone or something to pin down the awakened NPC for a moment. Only then could players approach the obelisk and activate the magic array inside the structure. When activated, the magic array would suppress Lancelot, making him much easier to deal with. Suddenly, Daybreak Fog contacted Singular Burial and asked, "Guild leader, I just discovered a method to deal with the NPC on the official forums. However, the other party is requesting 10,000 magic crystals. Should we purchase the information?" 10,000. Why doesn't he just rob us instead? Singular Burial bellowed. Although Heaven's Burial could obtain plenty of magic crystals, 10,000 was not a small number. However, as soon as Singular Burial finished speaking, Lancelot began to chant another incantation. The mana fueling this spell was no less than his earth pulsation. Moreover, due to dark gravitation, players were much closer to the NPC. "Guild leader, do we buy the information?" Although Daybreak Fog agreed that this price was ludicrous, they had no other options. "Buy it." Singular Burial gnashed his teeth. Losing one's immortal soul was no trivial matter. He did not want to take this risk. Inwardly, however, he swore to himself, this seller better not reveal his identity. I will not let him off the hook. Chapter 1092, Killing the Awakened. Chapter 1092, Killing the Awakened. After Singular Burial paid the 10,000 magic crystals, he appeared to age significantly. Zero Wing. I will make you pay for this. His goal in dispatching such a large army to Stone Forest Town had been to take advantage of the situation and plunder some of the weapons and equipment Zero Wing's members dropped. After all, Zero Wing's members were famous for their excellent items. The average standard of Guild's elite members was even higher than Heaven's Burial's. However, not only hadn't he gained anything, but he had also lost over 30,000 elite members and 10,000 magic crystals. After Heaven's Burial received the strategy he had paid for, he fell silent for a long time. He radiated a cold, deathly aura. The message he received only contained one sentence. Use the evil earth dragons to distract Lancelot and send someone into the obelisk to activate the magic array. He paid 10,000 magic crystals for this. At this moment, Singular Burial even considered devouring Feng whole. "Guild leader Burial, what's going on? What's with the ugly look? Peerless asked curiously when he noticed Singular Burial's enraged laugh. However, after some thought he found nothing unreasonable about Singular Burial's reaction. Heaven's Burial had not benefited from this war whatsoever despite sacrificing the majority of his 50,000 elite player army. It would be odd if Singular Burial were in a good mood. However, Peerless rather admired the other guild leader. He never thought that the man would be so open-minded as to laugh after such a loss. Only, the man's facial expression was slightly tense. However, Singular Burial was not ordinary. Very quickly, he sheathed his bubbling emotions and notified Abandoned Wave and Peerless of the method to raid Lancelot. Abandoned Wave immediately instructed the bandaged man to control the evil earth dragons to pin down Lancelot, while Peerless had the Red Jade Legion's experts sneak into the obelisk and search for the prepared magic array. When Zero Wings members had retreated, Phoenix Rain, who was currently in the faraway Apocalypse Empire, had paid attention to every movement in Stone Forest Town. A white-haired, slightly hunched old man also watched the war from inside the spacious guild leader's room. Although this man was already in his 70s and looked as if a strong breeze could topple him easily, Phoenix Rain treated him with great respect. This elder was none other than the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's great pavilion master. He was the true owner of the pavilion, Ku Rong. Zero Wing is quite interesting. To think such a small guild can catch both you and 9 dragons' attention at the same time, Ku Rong said, chuckling as he looked at the destroyed and occupied Stone Forest Town. However, while one of you has an optimistic view of the guild, the other is trying to destroy it. I cannot figure out what is going through your youthful minds nowadays. But Rain, you've slightly overdone it this time. You've invested so much into Zero Wing. Now that Zero Wing has lost Stone Forest Town, how are you going to compete with 9 dragons on Thunder Island? You know how important Thunder Island is to the guild. Moreover, I've already stated that whoever takes control of Thunder Island will succeed me in the future. I have always had a favorable opinion of you. I hope you do not disappoint me. When Phoenix Rain heard Ku Rong's words, her chest tightened. In reality, she had always wondered if she had made the right decision to invest so much into Zero Wing. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had only discovered Thunder Island by chance while exploring a dangerous zone out at sea. However, upon reaching Thunder Island, the pavilion had discovered certain information which the upper echelons greatly valued. Even Ku Rong, the great pavilion master who usually did not show himself in the guild, made an appearance. However, news about Thunder Island had quickly leaked, which attracted the attention of many super guilds. Several super guilds had already dispatched their capable forces to contest for the island. Meanwhile, Ku Rong had made up his mind and publicly announced to the guild the condition to become the next great pavilion master. Whoever took control of Thunder Island would become the next great pavilion master of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, and the future great pavilion master would control all of the guild's resources, talents, and future development. Even after so many years, Ku Rong had never once mentioned the matter of succession. Hence, Ku Rong's abrupt decision after reading the collected information on Thunder Island had stupefied all of the elders in the meeting. Phoenix Rain herself had been taken aback. However, wresting control of Thunder Island from 9 Dragons Emperor and the various super guilds was easier said than done. It would likely require far more resources than she could imagine. Moreover, even if she collected enough funds, her chances of taking control of Thunder Island were very small. It seems I'll have to find Black Flame or Yi Feng for a chat, Phoenix Rain thought as she massaged her temples. Meanwhile, Stone Forest Town was quite lively right now. After the magic array inside the obelisk had been activated, Lancelot's basic attributes had been significantly weakened. As a result, the power of his spells had decreased. After Lancelot had been weakened, players could finally damage the NPC. Unfortunately, they weren't able to deal much. Even level 40 experts' damage was only in the dozens, while elite players only dealt 2 or 3 damage. Moreover, Lancelot dodged most of the attacks sent at him. Even so, this turn of events gave these players hope of victory. Lancelot's maximum HP was now only 60 million. Although players' damage was low, many a little made a mickle. Furthermore, they still had the support of 3 evil earth dragons. From time to time, the mythic monsters would launch attacks that dealt tens of thousands of damage. It was only a matter of time before they wore out Lancelot. Everyone spread out. Melees stopped trying to approach the NPC and defend the magic array at the obelisk. Ranged players give him a beating. Abandoned Wave commanded excitedly as he stood atop the obelisk. After the obelisk's magic array had been activated, shadow monsters formed from mana began to assault the magic array fiercely. However, compared to Lancelot, these shadow monsters were very weak. They were mostly level 60 elite monsters. The 3 guilds' elite and expert melee players were more than enough to defend the magic array. In addition, the 3 evil earth dragons served as meat shields. Lancelot's HP had already fallen to 20%. To get to this point, they had paid the lives and souls of nearly 6,000 elite and expert players. 2 of the 3 evil earth dragons had also died in battle, with the last only had half of its HP remaining. However, based on Abandoned Wave's calculations, the remaining mythic monster should last them until Lancelot died. Just thinking about the loot a powerful NPC like Lancelot would drop caused Abandoned Wave's heart to jump with excitement. According to God's domain's iron laws, the stronger the monster or NPC was, the better the items they would drop. What kind of loot would an NPC that even 3 mythic monsters were helpless against drop? This thought had floated in Abandoned Wave's mind throughout the battle against Lancelot. Time quickly passed. When Lancelot's HP fell to 5%, the players inside the town charged at the NPC frantically. They completely ignored Lancelot's OE spells. He's nearly dead. Attack with everything you've got. Abandoned Wave shouted. Abandoned Wave wasn't the only person with such thoughts. Singular Burial and Peerless Hearts also began to pound. Very quickly, Lancelot's HP fell from 5% to 4% before falling to 3%. Meanwhile, Lancelot's retaliation grew more powerful, which rapidly increased the 3 guilds' death rate. Every one of the awakened NPC's attacks could easily kill hundreds of players. However, the guild's members were too tempted by the NPC's loot. They couldn't care less if their allies died. When Lancelot only had 1% HP remaining, Feng finally made his move. Using space movement, he instantly appeared above Lancelot. There's someone there. Someone actually dares to try to steal our loot. Kill him. Although everyone was absorbed in the battle, they were not so blind as to fail to notice an outsider. Kill-stealing was common in God's domain. Even they often practiced the act. Hence they were naturally wary of kill-steals. The instant Feng appeared, everyone instinctively shifted their attention to him. Wait, that's Black Flame. Some expert players with good eyesight quickly recognized the intruder. Black Flame. I never expected even you to make such a fatal mistake. Abandoned Wave could not help but laugh at Feng's foolish behavior. Immediately he commanded, everyone stop attacking the boss. Focus on Black Flame. Although Lancelot only had 1% HP remaining, 1% of 60 million was still 600,000. It was impossible for Feng to kill Lancelot by himself. Chapter 1093, Epic Legacy Skill. Hellscythe Underserve Empire. Chapter 1093, Epic Legacy Skill. Kill him. Show him the consequences of trying to steal our boss. Hearing Abandoned Wave's command, all the ranged players focused their fire on Feng. Immediately, a barrage of spells and arrows flew at Feng, who was still in midair. With Feng caught in free fall, ranged players could easily predict his trajectory and aim their attacks accordingly. Die. Singular Burial hated Feng down to the bones right now. If not for Feng releasing Lancelot, Heaven's Burial would not have suffered such a tragic loss. Now that Feng had taken the initiative to come looking for a beating, how could Singular Burial possibly let the man get away? Immediately, Singular Burial unslung the white feather double-string longbow from his back. He then knocked 5 silver arrows carved with magic patterns and shot them at Feng. After he loosed the arrows, they merged into one and flew at Feng like a meteor. Singular Burial had just used the Tier 1 taboo skill Flying Meteor. The power of this taboo skill rivaled that of a Tier 2 skill. Even a Tier 2 lord would be heavily injured and become temporarily paralyzed if they received it directly. Aside from singular burial, other ranged experts had also used their specialties. Instantly, over 100 attacks locked on Feng's landing spot. Faced with such an onslaught, even if Feng were on the ground right now, he would find it impossible to dodge them all, not to mention that he was still in midair. However, just when he was about to enter the line of fire, his body suddenly stopped descending. Consequently, all the attacks simply streaked past underfoot. Immediately after, Feng, who had activated Wind Rider, flew towards Lancelot. He's flying. How can he be flying? Everyone was stupefied when they witnessed this scene. As for Singular Burial, who was somewhat familiar with Feng, the fact that during the war at the Stoneclaw Mountains, Feng had once flown for a short time popped into his head. This is bad. He lured us away from the boss. Quick, stop the evil earth dragon from attacking the NPC. Noticing that Lancelot was moving farther and farther away, Singular Burial suddenly understood why Feng had not used his flying skill right off. At this moment, aside from the last remaining evil earth dragon, everyone else had stopped attacking Lancelot. Regardless, the damage of the mythic monster was still much higher than the combined damage of all the players present. Even if it did not use any powerful attacks against Lancelot, it would shave off the NPC's remaining 600,000 HP before long. With Feng's accurate judgment towards damage and timing, he could easily time his attack and land the finishing blow on Lancelot. In addition, Blackwater's members had previously taken the initiative to lure Lancelot away from the main army. With the distance created, Feng would have more than enough time to steal all the loot before the main army could catch up. This was a perfect plan that killed two birds with one stone. Hearing Singular Burial's words, Abandoned Wave also realized what was going on. Hurriedly, he had the bandaged man stop holding back the evil earth dragon and let it attack Lancelot with its full power. This Singular Burial sure reacted quickly. Feng frowned. Just as Feng was about to arrive before Lancelot, Abandoned Wave finally made a move himself. Taking out an extremely exquisite dark green crystal ball from his bag, he began chanting the incantation to activate it. With a sinister smile on his face, Abandoned Wave squeezed the crystal ball and shattered it. When the crystal ball shattered, a stream of black smoke flew to Feng. This crystal ball was an extremely precious sealing crystal that the bandaged man had given him. When activated, the crystal ball could silence any single player within a radius of 100 yards for 10 minutes. Feng's Wind Rider skill instantly vanished, and his body plummeted towards the ground. All melees surround him. Do not let him get away no matter what. Abandoned Wave shouted. Leave it to me, guild leader. Laughing Drunkard, who was charging at the forefront, licked his lips when he saw Feng falling. He was already prepared to land a fatal blow on Feng. The reason why players were strong was their ability to use numerous skills and spells. However, when they were silenced, they could only resort to normal attacks. Needless to say, a silenced player would have their combat power reduced significantly. Not to mention Feng was still in a weakened state right now. Aside from Laughing Drunkard, over a dozen other level 40+ melee experts were dashing towards Feng. As soon as Feng landed, they would use their control skills to restrict him and butcher him. In response, however, Feng took out a scroll from his bag leisurely. Summon Guard. Immediately, Kite's tall and muscular figure appeared before Feng in midair. The Dark Gold Guard then executed the Tier 2 skill Storm Blade. In the next moment, dozens of invisible wind blades struck at Laughing Drunkard and the others. Damn it! Laughing Drunkard immediately withdrew when he failed to read what kind of attack Kite had just executed. However, everyone else was not as fortunate. Anyone who attempted to defend against the descending wind blades ended up falling on their backs. Immediately after, several more wind blades reaped their lives. By the time Kite and Feng alighted safely, all the players, aside from Laughing Drunkard, who had been within 15 yards of them, had died to the Dark Gold Guard's attack. Kite's power caused the players who initially planned to rush at Feng to freeze up, putting an abrupt end to the footwork to execute charge. Black Flame, you will die here today. Don't think that a single NPC can save your life. Although Laughing Drunkard feared Kite, Feng himself was unable to use a single skill. As long as they distracted Kite, killing Feng would be a piece of cake. What if I have to? Feng laughed as he proceeded to summon Anna. With the dark gold ranked Kite protecting him and the epic ranked Anna on the offensive, the difficulty of killing him would most likely be even greater than if he were at his peak. The reason why guards were called guards in the first place was their very powerful ability to protect players. Without even waiting for Feng's command, Anna sprang into action as soon as she appeared. 10 stone guards abruptly appeared before her, forming a wall that blocked off all attacks from the front. The attacks of players could not even scratch the stone guards. In contrast, the stone guards sent numerous MTs flying with only a single attack. This situation rendered the surrounding players utterly helpless against Feng. As a result, Feng could stroll up to Lancelot. Crap. What kind of personal guards are they? They can actually cleave through an army of players so easily. My guess is that they're secret silver rank at the very least. They might even be the rumored fine gold guards. The spectating players were shocked when they saw how strong Kite and Anna were. Although the two NPCs had displayed frightening strength before, their performance right now was even more splendorous. However, Abandoned Wave, the guild leader of Blackwater, gnashed his teeth angrily when he saw this scene. At the same time, his heart was also tinged with jealousy. Kite was already plenty powerful, yet Feng actually had 2 of such personal guards. The aura Anna exuded seemed superior to even Kite's. Change of plans. All melees deal with Black Flame. Everyone else, kill the boss as quickly as possible. Abandoned Wave reluctantly chose to deal with Lancelot first when he saw Feng still unharmed despite coming under assault from so many players. His decision was because, during the brief period they had stopped attacking Lancelot, the latter's HP had recovered back to 2%. If this situation continued even after they managed to kill Feng, they wouldn't have any way of dealing with the NPC. Several thousand melee players promptly surrounded Feng, blocking his path to Lancelot. Anna, it's up to you now, Feng commanded immediately, having no intention of wasting time. The strength of an epic guard was not as simple as Abandoned Wave thought it to be. Nodding in response, Anna began chanting an incantation, her hand continuously writing line after line of divine runes so fast that others could not even see her hand. Meanwhile, Kite and the 10 stone guards hindered the assault of the maddened players and monsters. As Anna chanted the final verse of the incantation, a golden magic array suddenly appeared in the middle of the sky, covering a radius of 100 yards. In the next moment, a woman wearing golden divine armor and wielding a silver spear emerged from the magic array. 2 sets of white feathered wings spread wide from the woman's back. The instant this woman appeared, everyone could not help but turn their gaze towards the sky, fear and awe instantly flooding their hearts. A Valkyrie. This is a lie, right? Everyone was stupefied. Without waiting for anyone to react, the Valkyrie flapped her wings and abruptly flew before Anna. With a wave of her spear, she sent a storm sweeping across everyone. The ground before the Valkyrie shattered as if the mortal world could not withstand even a normal attack of the Valkyrie. Quickly finish off Lancelot. Feng ordered hurriedly. Angel summoning was a legacy skill Anna learned after being promoted into an epic guard. The skill allowed her to summon a Valkyrie to assist her in battle. However, the Valkyrie summoned could only be 2 tiers higher than Anna at most and would remain in existence for a short 10 seconds. Moreover, angel summoning had a cooldown of 1 full day. Feng did not wish to waste this opportunity. Under Anna's command, the Valkyrie transformed into a streak of light and appeared before Lancelot. When the Valkyrie swept her spear towards Lancelot, the weapon tore apart even space itself. The power contained within the attack was even stronger than Lancelot's without the suppression of the obelisk's magic array. At the critical moment, Lancelot activated 5-layered ice mirror. However, when the layers of ice came into contact with the Valkyrie's spear, they immediately shattered into oblivion. Furthermore, the spear's power did not decrease even in the slightest as it landed on Lancelot's body. Boom! Lancelot instantly shot away and his body crashed into the obelisk. His remaining 2% HP instantly fell to 0, leaving him deader than dead. Chapter 1094. Unstoppable EXP. Hellscythe Undersea Vampire. Chapter 1094. Unstoppable EXP. He's dead. Didn't he still have 2% HP left? Everyone was dumbfounded when they saw Lancelot's motionless body planted in the wall of the obelisk. They had personally seen for themselves just how powerful Lancelot was. Even after he was suppressed, pushing him into a critical state would have been impossible if not for the 3 level 65 mythic-ranked evil earth dragons slowly chipping away at his HP. In order to reach this point, they had sacrificed over 10,000 elite players and even 2 evil earth dragons, and yet. Black Flame. Abandoned Wave screamed at the top of his lungs when he saw that Lancelot was dead. At this moment, due to Feng landing the final hit on the awakened NPC, his experience bar was skyrocketing. In just a short moment he had gone from level 44 to level 45. Even then his experience bar continued to shoot up. Level 45 10%, 30%, 50%. The EXP awarded for killing an awakened is actually this much? Feng was momentarily stunned when he looked at his rising experience bar. The hidden class he possessed doubled the EXP he required to level up. Not to mention he had already reached level 44. Even killing 2 or 3 Grand Lords of the same rank would not net him 1 level. In the end, Feng rose from level 45 to level 46 and finally stopped at 84% of level 46. He was only 4 levels away from the level 50 threshold. This leveling speed truly surpassed Feng's expectations. Awesome. With this, I'll have more time to deal with the city building matter. Feng was in a great mood as he looked at his attribute panel. He could not help but wish he could kill several more awakened NPCs right now. That way he'd be able to reach level 50 post-haste and challenge his tier 2 class promotion. Then he could visit many places that were currently off-limits to him. Level 50 was a major threshold in God's domain. Not only would players receive a huge improvement to their weapons and equipment, but they could also visit more places. In God's domain, many rare maps opened up only to players that were level 50 and above. Although God's domain was different from most virtual reality games, it still imposed plenty of restrictions on players as a form of protection. These rare maps were perilous. Players below level 50 that visited these would undoubtedly die. Even after they met the level requirement to enter these maps, they would only have a slightly higher chance of survival. In the past, many of God's domain players had suffered under this restriction. When they stumbled across such maps with zero knowledge about them whatsoever, they received a free trip back to their respective cities, courtesy of the main god system, wasting plenty of precious travel time. After Feng got over his joy of leveling up twice, he shifted his gaze up to the air. After Lancelot died, he had dropped plenty of items. However, they were all scattered around the obelisk, not concentrated at a single location. Right then, the players inside Stone Forest Town also noticed the items strewn in midair around the obelisk. Immediately, greed surfaced in their eyes. With how powerful Lancelot was, one could just imagine how amazing the loot he dropped would be. Most likely, any random item could sell for an astronomical sum. Everyone swarmed towards the obelisk. Not daring to waste time idling around, Feng dashed straight for the closest item. However, after he had taken only a few steps forward, a deafening roar entered his ears. In the next moment, the last evil earth dragon executed savage charge on Feng. Not only did the skill provide the mythic monster with tremendous speed, but the first target its charge hit would also suffer 400% damage. If struck, even a tier 2 metric tons of the same level would be killed instantly, not to mention the weakened Feng. Most likely, even a scratch would send him to his grave. Go. Kill him. Abandoned Wave's eyes burned with rage after he saw 2 consecutive golden auras enveloping Feng. If not for Feng's interference, the person who leveled up twice might have been him. As for Lancelot's loot, he had long since ordered some assassins to collect them. Roar. The evil earth dragon roared as it charged at Feng, its speed so fast that even if Feng activated Wind Rider, he would not outrun it. Just as the evil earth dragon was about to reach Feng, the beautiful Valkyrie appeared before Feng. She then thrust her spear at the approaching mythic monster. Ping! As a clashing sound echoed throughout the entire town, Not only did the evil earth dragon's charge abruptly stop, but the mythic monster even went flying over 30 yards away. When its body slammed into the ground, the earth beneath it cratered. The evil earth dragon instantly lost 3% of its HP, leaving it with only 16% of its HP. Such strength. Her strength should be close to a tier 5 existences. As expected of a higher being. Feng was astounded at this scene. The evil earth dragon was bleeding profusely from the wound on its chest right now, and even the claw it used to block the Valkyrie's spear was bent at an unnatural angle. This was the difference brought about by life rating. Despite both being tier 4 existences, the level 69 Valkyrie's strength completely eclipsed the evil earth dragon's. By the time the evil earth dragon stood back up, the Valkyrie was already before it. Hovering in midair, the Valkyrie gently flapped her wings as she silently looked down on the evil earth dragon. Just when the mythic monster tried to do something, the Valkyrie sent another stab at it. Boom! The evil earth dragon got planted into the ground once again. This time only half its body was above ground. Meanwhile, its HP fell by another 3%. Everyone else inside the town felt a violent tremor that nearly caused them to lose their balance. After receiving a series of rapid attacks from the Valkyrie, the evil earth dragon was thoroughly embedded into the ground, with only its cranium, which was about to be flattened, above the surface. At this moment, the mythic monster had only 4% of its HP remaining. Then the Valkyrie chanted an incantation. A massive, glowing sword manifested in the sky and plunged towards the evil earth dragon. When the sword crashed into the mythic monster's exposed head, it took away the monster's last strand of HP. After witnessing the Valkyrie's series of attacks, everyone was thoroughly stupefied. Before the Valkyrie, a tier 4 mythic monster was no different from a common monster. She had slaughtered the evil earth dragon with no difficulty whatsoever. Meanwhile, Feng, who was currently frantically picking up loot, leveled up once more, reaching level 47. When the Valkyrie shifted her gaze towards the nearby players, everyone suddenly couldn't breathe. At this moment, it was as if their lives were out of their hands. Moreover, their bodies also felt extraordinarily heavy. Guild leader Wave, let's retreat. Singular Burial no longer had the will to fight when he looked at the Valkyrie. The Valkyrie was simply too strong. Even sending an army of 300,000 elite players against her would be pure folly. If they remained here, most likely not a single one of them would leave Stone Forest Town alive. Peerless nodded in agreement with Singular Burial's words. Of the 3 core legions he had brought with him, the Red Jade Legion was no longer functional. Currently he had lost only 1/3 of his forces. He still had a chance to redeem himself. If he lost everything, however, he would have to start drafting his letter of resignation already. Fine. Let's go. Abandoned Wave's eyes were filled with reluctance as he said this. However, even though he was reluctant, he knew that contending with the Valkyrie was impossible. Chapter 1095. 1 vs 5. Hellscythe Underserve Empire. Chapter 1095, 1 vs 5. Wait, something's wrong with that Valkyrie. Doesn't it seem like she's starting to become translucent? You have that feeling as well. Quick look. That Valkyrie is starting to disappear. Right after Abandoned Wave gave the command to retreat, a sudden change to the Valkyrie immediately grabbed everyone's attention. The Valkyrie's appearance had simply given them too much of a shock. Even Abandoned Wave and the others who hated Zero Wing down to the bones had no choice but to give up on Stone Forest Town. However, now that the Valkyrie started facing problems, their hopes rekindled. Seeing this scene, Abandoned Wave immediately interrupted the activation of his return scroll. Everyone, hinder Black Flame and buy our people some time. After Abandoned Wave was sure that the Valkyrie had disappeared, a sinister smile appeared on his face. Lancelot's loot was just too tempting. Most likely no player would willingly abandon it. Previously, he had already sent a team of assassins to collect the items in secret to avoid detection by the Valkyrie. Now, however, there was no need for such precautionary measures. Currently, Zero Wing had no one present aside from Black Flame and his 2 NPC guards. Although killing Black Flame might be difficult, plundering Lancelot's loot would be a piece of cake. After all, with the awakened NPC's numerous drop items scattered all over the place, how could one person's looting efficiency outmatch a group's? Once Abandoned Wave gave the command, Peerless and Singular Burial also began coordinating their forces to cooperate with Blackwater's members. Regardless if it was Kite or Anna, neither was in existence that current players could go up against. However, there would be no problems if they only wished to distract the two guards for a short period. Particularly, they still possessed magic arrays in their hands. As long as they found the opportunity to trap Kite and Anna using these magic arrays, killing the silenced black flame would be child's play. After Feng picked up another item, he suddenly discovered over 1,000 players converging on his location. Dozens of the previously stealthed assassins have also begun making bold moves. Without hesitation, Feng dashed towards the obelisk. Currently, not only was he silenced, but he was also in a weakened state. He would simply be asking for a beating if he challenged 1,000 elite players. Not to mention the experts of the Red Jade Legion were among these players. As for Kite and Anna, both of them had already been trapped in magic barriers and were currently fighting against a group of players and one-horn humanoid monsters. The two guards had no attention to spare for him. Shortly after Feng started running towards the obelisk, his pursuers stopped cold. A legion of 1,000 players had suddenly appeared beside Feng. Meanwhile, the person leading this legion was none other than Starmoon Kingdom's renowned snow goddess, Gentle Snow. So it's guild leader Snow. Abandoned Wave laughed involuntarily when he saw Gentle Snow. I was originally planning to take care of you slowly. I never thought you would actually send yourself to me. Charge. Get rid of them all. He had a very clear understanding of Gentle Snow's strength. Although she was indeed quite strong, the people on his side were not unknown nobodies either. Just the Red Jade Legion Peerless led had several Refinement Realm experts. Although both sides were roughly equal in number in terms of quality, his army definitely surpassed Gentle Snow's. In accordance with Abandoned Wave's command, Peerless led 4 Refinement Realm experts and charged at Gentle Snow. As for Singular Burial, he led a group specifically to deal with the silenced Feng. Your opponent is me. When Gentle Snow noticed Singular Burial heading towards Feng, she threw her greatsword at the man. Death throw. If you wish to deal with our guild leader, you need to get through me, Lightning Blade, first. At this time, a guardian knight appeared beside Singular Burial and wielded his square shield to receive the greatsword. Meanwhile, Singular Burial did not even try to dodge the oncoming greatsword as he continued making his way to Feng. He was very familiar with Lightning Blade's strength. Heaven's Burial's current strongest MT was probably the level 41 Lightning Blade, who could hold his ground against a High Lord of the same level all by himself without using any skills. Defending against a player's attack would be a walk in the park for him. Ping! When the greatsword collided with his shield, Lightning Blade had to take 4 steps back, damage of over -2,000 appearing above his head. Although this amount of damage was nothing to him, who possessed nearly 30,000 HP, an extraordinarily ugly expression still surfaced on his face. Why is her strength so powerful? After Lightning Blade stabilized his body, he looked at Gentle Snow somewhat fearfully. The equipment he currently wore could definitely rank near the top in the current god's domain, particularly with the epic bracer he had on right now. The bracer increased the effective strength contained within his attacks by 20%. Even if he was going up against a berserker of the same level, he was confident of surpassing the latter in a contest of strength. For the greatsword Gentle Snow threw to actually force him back by so many steps. Gentle Snow's strength was simply unbelievable. Meanwhile, facing the encirclement of Peerless and his 4 companions, Gentle Snow waved her hand lightly. Suddenly, 3 dazzling, divine spears appeared around her. Peerless and the others immediately felt as if they had sunk into a muddy swamp, their movement speed and attack speed decreasing significantly, and they could only watch as the 3 divine spears flew at them. Along with the clangor of metal, 3 of the 5 players perished instantly. Only Peerless and another swordsman remained alive. How did she suddenly become so powerful? Didn't they say that she had entered the refinement realm just recently? Peerless had an ugly expression on his face as he stared at Gentle Snow, his eyes filled with confusion. Currently, however, the most shocked wasn't Peerless but Gentle Snow. Right before the battle began, Feng had actually passed her a fragmented legendary item, the 7 Luminaries battle armor. Although a chest plate mainly increased a player's defensive capabilities, the additional strength it provided allowed her combat power to undergo a qualitative change. The 7 Luminaries spears that came with the activation of the 7 Luminaries domain allowed her to display strength rivaling that of a great lord of the same level even without activating a berserk skill. As a result, the massive gap in strength allowed Gentle Snow to fend off the attacks of Peerless Singular Burial, and the others single-handedly. The disparity was so great that she was even overwhelming Peerless and the others, causing the pressure on them to grow increasingly heavier. How did she become so powerful? Abandon Wave was filled with shock. Before, Gentle Snow's true strength only allowed her to go up against one Refinement Realm expert. Going up against 2 at the same time was definitely beyond her. Yet, after vanishing from the public eye for just a short time, she was now actually capable of going up against 5 Refinement Realm experts at the same time. She had even managed to kill 3 instantly. This feat was utterly inconceivable. Just as everyone was stunned by Gentle Snow's performance, Feng finally arrived before the massive crystal ball atop the obelisk. System: do you wish to use 10,000 magic crystals to repair the seal? Without hesitation, Feng clicked yes. The 10,000 magic crystals he obtained from Heaven's Burial immediately disappeared. The massive amount of mana contained within the magic crystals then began returning the sealing crystal ball to its original state rapidly. At the same time, the purple barrier that had previously disappeared also enveloped Stone Forest Town once again. Chapter 1096. Wildly Arrogant. Hellscythe Undersea Vampire. Chapter 1096. Wildly Arrogant. When the purple barrier appeared around Stone Forest Town once more, the excited members of Blackwater could not help but stare at their surroundings. The magic barrier didn't just reduce their combat power. Most importantly, it prevented them from leaving Stone Forest Town. On the other hand, Zero Wing could send in reinforcements continuously to whittle down their forces. At this moment, Abandoned Wave's complexion also turned extremely pale as he stared at the disguised Feng, who was standing at the top of the obelisk. As long as the magic barrier existed, none of his forces could leave the town. Moreover, Lancelot's loot would remain in an ownerless state for 2 hours after the items first appeared. As long as the players holding those items died, the looted item would drop from their corpses. 2 hours were more than enough for Zero Wing's reinforcements to arrive and wipe them out. What a devious plan. Yuan Tiexin, who was observing the battle from Saimu Town, felt a hint of fear towards Feng after witnessing this scene. With this, Blackwater, Heaven's Burial and Pantheon are truly finished. Thinking about it now, Feng was truly a terrifying existence. Not only did he possess extraordinary strength, but he was also an incredible strategist. Despite going up against Blackwater's powerful army, Feng had actually managed to wear it down bit by bit, weakening it to such a state. Even a veteran like Yuan Tiexin, who had fought plenty of wars before, was horrified by Feng's capabilities. From beginning to end, this war had been under Feng's control. By the time Blackwater's members realized this, everything was already too late. Currently, Blackwater no longer had a numerical advantage. Neither did it possess experts of superior quality. It didn't even hold a terrain advantage. Uncle Yuan, now that Zero Wing has already won this war, are we still going to look for Black Flame? Purple Jade asked. She was not interested in this war in the slightest. However, through this war her need to challenge Black Flame to a fight had further solidified. Of course we're still going. Or to put it in another way, because Zero Wing has won, we have even more reason to visit him, Yuan Tiexin replied, laughing. Although Zero Wing had won this war, Stone Forest Town was in ruins. Zero Wing could not sustain itself with just the income of the candlelight trading firm. Right now the guild was in dire need of a new source of income for coins. Otherwise it would very quickly fall into stagnation. Something it could not afford to happen, particularly during this period when the experts of the various large guilds were reaching level 41 after another. If Zero Wing did not have the financial strength to supply its guild members with mounts, it would definitely fall behind the other guilds. Meanwhile, the secret pavilion could provide Zero Wing with cities and markets to develop in. Yuan Tiexin was not worried about not being able to obtain the magic tower design at all. Time passed quickly. Inside Stone Forest Town, the members of Blackwater, Heaven's Burial, and Pantheon began to assault the obelisk desperately. MTs, open a path for us. Healers, pay attention to healing. Assassins, sneak inside. As long as we destroy the magic crystal on top of the tower, we will be able to leave this place. At this time, Abandoned Wave himself was also participating in the battle, giving out commands while he fought against Zero Wing's members. Whoever manages to break that crystal, I'll give them an epic item. Peerless and Singular Burial also nodded in agreement with Abandoned Wave's decision. After all, they had obtained a total of 26 items from Lancelot. Meanwhile, Zero Wing had managed to get only 2. If they had to pay 1 epic item to bring the 26 items away, the trade would definitely be worth it. Hearing this, everyone immediately started fighting with even greater desperation. In the current God's domain, the higher the level 1 reached, the more difficult it was to obtain high-quality weapons and equipment. Ordinary players already treated dark gold items as godly items, not to mention epic items. As elite members of their respective guilds, obtaining an epic item was practically a dream. In God's domain, be it dungeons or ancient ruins, the more dangerous a place was, the easier it was to obtain good weapons and equipment. However, the requirement in individual combat standards and basic attributes for entering these locations were considerably high. Dark gold items were not comparable to epic items. To elite players like them, an epic item could provide them with significant improvements. It was their ticket to the world of experts. The expert players present had mostly reacted in the same manner. After all, even super guilds had obtained only a limited number of epic items, which were then provided to an extremely small number of qualified apex experts. What suicidal maniacs! Even Gentle Snow felt somewhat pressured as she fought off the oncoming horde of players. The enemy was fully intent on trading blow for blow. If not for the healers providing sufficient healing, she would have long since drowned in the sea of players. However, this kind of attack method had also opened a path to the obelisk. Leading hundreds of elite players, Abandoned Wave, Peerless and Singular Burial charged into the obelisk. The interior of the obelisk consisted of a spiraling staircase that continued all the way to the top of the structure. Just as everyone was about to reach the top of the tower, a figure in black suddenly appeared before them, blocking their path forward. The instant this figure appeared, Abandoned Wave and the others involuntarily stopped their advance, their eyes filled with fear as they looked at this figure. This figure was none other than the guild leader of Zero Wing, Black Flame, the man also known as the Sword King, who was the #1 expert of Starmoon Kingdom. If it were before this war, everyone present would only feel some reverence towards Black Flame. They definitely would not fear him. However, after witnessing Black Flame's frightening performance in this war, even if one did not try to recall those scenes, their hearts would immediately palpitate in fear at the sight of the blue longsword in Black Flame's hand. Black Flame, do you think you can hold off so many people just by yourself? Although Abandoned Wave similarly felt fearful, the current situation was different from before. Not only was Black Flame in a weakened state right now, but Abandoned Wave had even silenced him just a while ago. Most importantly, the staircase they were standing on provided much more space than the narrow hallway before the underground secret room. They had enough room for over a dozen players to attack Black Flame at the same time. Looking at the tense expressions his opponents were making, Feng simply shrugged and chuckled as he said, "How will I know if I don't give it a try?" Arrogance. Peerless abruptly executed charge on Feng, lifting his shield as he rushed at Feng. The other melee players in the group also began circling around Feng, intent on surrounding him. Immediately after, Singular Burial also shot out numerous arrows to prevent Feng from dodging sideways. If Feng was not weakened and silenced, they might have to be wary of him. Now, however, they had no reason to fear him whatsoever. Without even trying to evade the rapidly approaching shield warrior, Feng chose to clash directly with Peerless. Ping! Along with the sound of metal clashing, Peerless felt as if he had just collided with a truck, his body, which was as huge as a bear, involuntarily taking a few steps backward. Everyone could not help but be dumbfounded. Peerless was one of Pantheon's apex shield warriors, yet a swordsman who was both weakened and silenced, actually forced him back. Peerless was inwardly dismayed as well. Others might not know how powerful Feng's attack was, but Peerless knew very clearly. Unless Feng possessed strength rivaling a high lords of the same level, it was practically impossible for him to achieve such an outcome. Yet how could a weakened player possibly have strength rivaling a high lords of the same level? Chapter 1097, Might of the Sword King. Hellscythe Underservampire. Chapter 1097, Might of the Sword King. Although Peerless was dismayed, he very quickly regained his calm. He might not be a match for Feng in a frontal confrontation, but he wasn't alone. Right now, over a dozen level 40 experts had already surrounded Feng. Even if Feng's strength was great, he was not invincible. As long as Peerless continued distracting Feng, the others would have an opportunity to take advantage of the weak points Feng exposed. In addition, unlike the time at the hallway before the secret room, Feng did not have any healers supporting him this time. I'll figure out a way to block his attacks. You guys find an opportunity to attack from his blind spot. Peerless commanded secretly through the team chat. The 15 melee experts nodded silently in response, and they began watching Feng's every move. Once Feng launched another attack against Peerless, they would take action at the same time. Then even if Feng had 6 arms and 3 heads, he wouldn't be able to defend against them. Moreover, aside from melee players like themselves, Singular Burial was also looking for an opening from a distance. At this moment, Singular Burial carefully retrieved a black arrow from his bag. The instant this black arrow appeared, Abandoned Wave, who stood beside him, felt like death was imminent. Black Flame, you should feel proud that you forced me to use this black arrow. Singular Burial's eyes were filled with reluctance as he looked at the black arrow in his hand. He had obtained 5 of such arrows from some ruins and had used 2 of them recently to deal with a field Grand Lord. He had never imagined that he would use one of the remaining 3 arrows on Black Flame. However, he still considered this to be a worthwhile trade. Time was of the essence right now. If they did not kill Black Flame soon, the other Zero Wing members would be able to catch up quickly. Singular Burial knocked the arrow and drew his longbow into a full moon. The black arrow locked on Black Flame's body. After everyone was ready, Peerless activated Shield Wall and dashed at Feng. Not only could the Tier 1 Shield Wall skill reduce the damage taken by its user, but it also possessed the ability to resist impact forces. As long as Shield Wall was activated, even a Great Lord couldn't force him back by a single step. At the same time, the 15 other melee players surrounding Feng promptly used their most powerful skills. Berserker's Beheaded. Guardian Knight's Holy Slash. Assassin's Absolute Strike. Swordsman's 5 consecutive slashes. All kinds of killing moves were used. Even a Domain Realm expert would not be able to defend against all these simultaneous attacks. In the next moment, just as Peerless was about to arrive before Feng, the latter suddenly disappeared from everyone's sight. This move was none other than Void Steps. It was footwork capable of causing the opponent's mind to actively ignore the user's presence, making it seem as if one had suddenly disappeared. Not good. Reacting very quickly, Peerless immediately stomped his foot, executing Thunderclap. The ground instantly cracked, the skill inflicting a certain amount of damage to all targets within a certain range. At the same time, targets hit by the attack would also have their movement speeds reduced. Peerless intended to use this skill to prevent Feng from utilizing Void Steps normally. However, he was still a step too late. When Feng reappeared, he was already standing beside a berserker, his sword slashing up at a 45-degree angle towards the berserker. Before the level 40 berserker could react, a blue streak of light cut through his neck. So fast. The assassin positioned beside the berserker felt his neck grow cold when he witnessed this scene out of the corner of his eyes. Only after the strike hit did the berserker react. He hurried to twist his body, instinctively executing Whirlwind Slash to repel Feng. However, before the berserker's body could start rotating, the abyssal blade in Feng's other hand pierced through the side of the berserker's armor and stabbed straight into his heart. Instead of pulling the magic weapon out directly, he sliced through the front of the berserker's chest, dealing another blow to the berserker. Immediately after, Feng spun around to the berserker's back. Killing Ray described an arc, and just as Feng arrived behind the berserker, the sacred sword also stabbed into the berserker's back and again hit his heart. Minus 13,976. Minus 5,738. Minus 6,417. Minus 17,233. Everyone only saw 4 sword lights passing through the berserker's body before the berserker, who had over 20,000 HP, collapsed to the ground. Combat Technique 4 Moon Lotus. This was a basic combat technique that all swordsmen needed to learn. In God's domain, the silence debuff was something players commonly encountered. Although a silence state was a nightmare for ordinary and elite players, it hampered the combat prowess of an expert player only slightly. This was because they could utilize combat techniques to make up for the loss of their skills, although combat techniques placed a much greater burden on a player's stamina and concentration. In terms of pure power, while combat techniques were inferior to in-game skills, the former was not subject to cooldown. Combat techniques could also be used while silenced. Hence, so long as one was an expert, they would generally have a few combat techniques under their belts. Not only could combat techniques be used to make up for one's lack of combat power when their skills were on cooldown, but combat techniques could also be used to add variation to one's attacks. Due to this flexibility, even an expert with average equipment could easily beat an elite player with superior equipment senseless. The instant the berserker died, everyone felt a chill crawling down their backs. This gorgeous attack was simply an eye-opener for everyone. However, the truly shocking thing was the damage Feng dealt the level 40 berserker. Be careful. He's no longer in a weakened state. Peerless shouted. Previously he had been wondering why Feng possessed such strength despite being in a weakened state. Initially he ascribed it to a special effect of equipment that multiplied his strength. However, after seeing the movement speed and attack speed Feng displayed, in addition to the damage he dealt, Peerless became certain that the current Feng was already back to his peak state. At Peerless' warning, ugly expressions appeared on everyone's faces. The reason they had joined the vanguard was their belief that Feng's attributes had been reduced, and that they could utilize their advantage in attributes to offset the gap in techniques. However, now that Feng had already recovered his attributes. In reality, Feng himself had been surprised when he noticed that his weakened state was lifted so soon. Unexpectedly, the life essences actually served to hasten one's recovery from a weakened state. Otherwise he would not have dared to come and stop Abandoned Wave and the others so casually. However, he did not give his opponents much time to think, immediately executing void steps and charging towards another player. The various melee players had already been only a short distance away from Feng. Now that they were charging up to him one after another, Feng just needed to use void steps once to arrive beside another player. Without utilizing any skills, Feng succeeded in reaping another person's life using only void steps and 4 Moon Lotus. Before Peerless could even try to stop Feng, the latter had already killed a total of 5 players. Nobody could defend against Feng's 4 Moon Lotus. Feng was like the god of death. Whomever he appeared beside would inevitably die. At this moment, everyone finally understood why the secret pavilion had dubbed Feng One-Hit Azura. The pressure of death caused everyone's body to feel extremely heavy, their movements turning sluggish. Black Flame, time to die. At this moment, Singular Burial, who had constantly been searching for an opportunity, grinned as he released the bowstring and sent the black arrow flying upward. Xiu. The black arrow broke through the sound barrier as it shot towards Feng's heart. What a fast arrow. Feng had long since taken notice of Singular Burial's actions. However, when he saw the approaching black light, he still could not help but be shocked. At the critical moment, Feng instinctively crossed his swords before him directly in the arrow's trajectory. Boom. Feng immediately felt his hands going numb, his body forced through the air by the arrow as his HP continuously decreased. It felt as if he had just received a meteor with his swords. After recovering from his momentary daze, he moved his swords, deflecting the arrow. Suddenly, a black arrow could be seen flying towards the top of the obelisk. At this moment, less than half of Feng's 30,000 plus HP remained. Chapter 1098. Extravagant Combat Method. Hellscythe Underservampire. Chapter 1098. Extravagant Combat Method. The black arrow shot straight upwards and stopped only after it hit the ceiling of the obelisk. The arrow then transformed into particles of light and disappeared. That was close. The sight of the arrow prompted a thought to pop into Feng's head. The black arrow, is it? The black arrow was an item left behind in ancient ruins. It was somewhat similar to magic scrolls, and when used, it could display extraordinary destructive power. This destructive power corresponded to the player's own strength. However, the black arrow's power could go up to tier 4 at most. But even when used against tier 4 mythic monsters, the black arrow could still heavily injure them. As it was an item that could be found only in ancient ruins, the black arrow was still considerably rare in God's domain. In the past, each black arrow sold for a minimum of 300 gold on the market. It was a treasure that many expert teams dearly wished to possess. After all, mythic monsters were simply too powerful. If they could heavily injure such a monster and reduce its combat power slightly, they would have a much easier time dealing with it. Using a black arrow was equivalent to paying 300 gold in exchange for the life of a mythic monster. Such a trade was sure profit. Of course, even if a mythic monster were heavily injured, it still would not be easily killed. Its combat power would definitely remain above a Grand Lord. Hence, teams still needed to have a certain amount of strength. Fortunately, Singular Burial was only a tier 1 ranger. If he were tier 2 right now, he would be able to display the black arrow's full power. In that case, Feng would have to activate absolute defense or suffer death. Even so, the black arrow was plenty frightening already. In just a little more than a second, Feng had lost over half his HP. Had he delayed in deflecting the arrow by even one more second, he would have really died back there. He didn't die. Singular Burial was stunned by this outcome. Although the black arrow might not be as powerful as a tier 4 single-target spell, its might was not something a tier 1 player could easily defend against. After all, Singular Burial had sent a great lord flying over 20 yards and inflicted heavy injuries when he had used the black arrow before. Nevertheless, Singular Burial's arrow allowed the melee players, who had surrounded Feng, to breathe out a sigh of relief. Brother Burial, I never thought you would actually possess such a trump card as well. We'll be mainly relying on you to deal with Black Flame from now on. As long as you kill Black Flame, we'll let you have the first pick of the loot, Abandoned Wave said. Previously, he already felt helpless when he witnessed Feng's horrific strength. He had never imagined that Singular Burial would still bring him such a pleasant surprise. Peerless similarly had his hopes rekindled as he nodded in agreement with Abandoned Wave's words. Singular Burial had taken away over half of Feng's HP in just a single attack. As long as he struck him again, the latter would undoubtedly die. Feng's death would break the myth of Zero Wing's guild leader's invincibility. At that time, Zero Wing would definitely receive a huge blow to its reputation. Alright then. Leave it to me, Singular Burial said, gnashing his teeth. He then retrieved the 2 remaining black arrows from his bag. However, his reaction speed is too fast. Moreover, now that he is prepared for my attacks, it will become much more difficult to hit him. You guys need to think of a way to pin down his movements for a moment. Leave it to us, Peerless and Abandoned Wave said boldly. Previously, they hadn't been confident of dealing with Feng, who had recovered to his peak state. However, now that they had Singular Burial's black arrows, they had no problem with distracting Feng whatsoever. Immediately, Peerless and Abandoned Wave had the players still capable of using Berserk skills step forward. A total of 8 players had Berserk skills ready for use, 2 Elementalists and 6 melee players, which included Peerless. Feng's basic attributes were indeed heaven-defying. However, after they used their Berserk skills, their attributes would still be slightly superior to his. With 6 melee players and 2 elementalists working together, they could suppress even a Great Lord for a short period, not to mention Feng, whose attributes were still beneath the Great Lord. Go! Under Peerless' command, the 5 other melee experts activated their berserk skills together with Peerless. With their attributes increased significantly, they charged at Feng, who was currently recuperating at the rooftop. At this moment Feng took out an intermediate regeneration potion and drank it. His HP instantly recovered back to 20,000, then began slowly rising bit by bit. Seeing Peerless charging at him, Feng promptly executed Void Steps, avoiding an entanglement with the shield warrior. This move of yours is already useless against me. Very quickly after pinpointing Feng's location, Peerless used Earth Slam. The skill could place all targets within an area of 8 by 15 yards before him into a fainted state. Feng's Void Steps was indeed powerful. However, Peerless had also gradually gotten accustomed to the technique after seeing Feng using it multiple times throughout this battle. Although he was only able to catch a blurry view of the swordsman, he could more or less still perceive the direction of Feng's movements. In the next moment Feng became visible within the range of Earth Slam. Immediately the other 5 melee experts executed their own control skills one after another. The 2 elementalists standing at the rear also summoned ice walls to surround Feng completely. If Feng wanted to retreat, he would have to spend a moment shattering the ice walls. This brief period would be more than enough for the 5 remaining melee players to land their attacks on the swordsman. As long as even a single control skill struck Feng, his death would be certain. This was also one of the strong points of in-game skills. If an expert player did not possess any control removal skills or they were silenced, just a handful of elite players working together could defeat them. Right when the 5 melee players were about to reach Feng, they suddenly stopped moving. "What's going on with you all?" Peerless bellowed. However, Peerless suddenly felt that something was amiss when he noticed the HPs of the 5 players decreasing rapidly. He instinctively took a step back and, at that critical moment, avoided the shadow spreading on the rooftop. With a swing of his sword, Feng shattered the ice wall blocking his front. He then looked at Peerless, who was roughly 15 yards away from him, feeling somewhat surprised. His reactions are fast. The shadow on the floor was none other than the effect of the Tier 2 magic scroll Shadow Strangulation, which could bind all enemies within a 15-yard radius as well as deal 50% dark damage to them every second for 5 seconds. By the time the 5 melee experts reacted and were about to use their control removal skills, Feng was already unfurling another Tier 2 magic scroll, Spears of Judgment. Immediately, 36 holy spears appeared around him, each one capable of 80% holy damage with 100% strength effect. Moreover, they also ignored defense and dealt double damage to dark creatures. Shio. The 36 spears shot straight at the 5 melee players. Despite all 5 of them being experts, with the spears under Feng's control and fired at such a short distance, each melee player managed to block only 2 or 3 spears at most, with the remaining spears hitting their bodies. All 5 melee players transformed into particles of light and disappeared on the spot. Everyone stared stupefied at this situation. They never thought that Feng would actually use magic scrolls to make up for his silenced state. Magic scrolls were extremely precious, not to mention Tier 2 magic scrolls. Each one was easily worth a piece of dark gold equipment. Normally, it would be considered a luxury to use Tier 2 magic scrolls against ordinary bosses. Nobody would be willing to waste them on just a few players. Nevertheless, Feng really was using them one after another. Moreover, each one was more valuable than the last. Die. At this moment, Singular Burial finally found an opportunity to attack. He immediately loosed the 2 knocked black arrows. The black arrows instantly transformed into 2 streaks of black light as they flew towards Feng. With how fast the black arrows were, Feng did not have time to use another magic scroll to defend himself. Just when the arrows were less than 10 yards away from him, Feng began executing Sword's Orbit, surrounding himself in starlight. Ping, ping. Two clear sounds of metal clashing rang out. Feng went flying backwards by over 10 yards, his hands nearly losing their grip on his swords. His HP began rapidly decreasing as well, only stabilizing after falling to slightly below 7,000. The two black arrows had their trajectories forcefully altered and as a result, simply flew by Feng's sides. Impossible. Isn't he still silenced? Singular Burial could not believe what he was seeing was true. Feng was actually still alive. Chapter 1099, Town Promotion Order. Hellscythe Underservampire. Chapter 1099, Town Promotion Order. Is he a monster? Everyone was stupefied when they saw that Feng survived Singular Burial's attacks. Previously, a single black arrow had reaped over half of Feng's HP. Yet now, despite receiving two black arrows, he lost less than half of his HP. All ranged players focus fire on him. He doesn't have much HP remaining. While everyone else was frozen in shock at Feng's feet, Abandoned Wave quickly reacted and took out a dark gray magic scroll from his bag. Tier 2 Magic Scroll, Death's Flurry. Immediately, 8 gray blades of wind swept towards Feng. At this moment, the other ranged players also began launching their own attacks one after another. However, Feng had no intention of simply waiting for his death. Executing void steps, he disappeared before everyone once again. The incoming attacks just passed through his original position, not a single one landing on him. Damn it! He actually recovered so quickly. The corners of Abandoned Wave's eyes twitched when he saw this scene. Hurriedly he commanded, "Everyone form a defensive formation and advance." Void steps was truly mysterious footwork. Even with how powerful Peerless was, the shield warrior could only make out a blurry figure of Feng if the latter was within a radius of 20 yards. Beyond that range he could not detect the swordsman at all. As for Abandoned Wave and everyone else, not to mention 20 yards, even if Feng were standing within 10 yards of them and launching an attack on them, they wouldn't notice a thing. Hence the only method to deal with this problem was to advance in a defensive circle. This way Feng would have no opportunity to approach Abandoned Wave who was inside the circle. Peerless had also immediately entered the defensive circle, fully prepared to protect Abandoned Wave. Right now, Abandoned Wave carried all of Lancelot's loot they obtained. If he died, all the loot would definitely drop. While having a single person carry all the loot was a risky move, having multiple people carry them would give Zero Wing an easier chance to target them, and make it more difficult to protect the loot. Anyhow, Abandoned Wave himself was a level 40 assassin. In terms of combat standards, he was also a considerably powerful expert. As long as he entered stealth, he could easily escape detection. Faced with Abandoned Wave and the others' slowly advancing defensive formation, Feng would appear sporadically before players standing at the outer edge, reaping a life before disappearing again. If he had enough time, he would even kill 2 players. What a tough turtle shell. Feng was rendered speechless by his opponent's actions. He had already used up all the AoE attack magic scrolls he had on hand. There were only a few single target attack and control magic scrolls left, not enough to affect the overall battle at all. However, if he tried jumping over, they would definitely discover him while he was in the air. Players in midair could not change their movement trajectory. They would be sitting ducks. However, if he was greedy and went for more kills each time, he would very quickly lose his life under a barrage of attacks. After all, his opponents were not ordinary players. They coordinated well with each other and their attacks were also very accurate. Moreover, he normally couldn't finish off a player with just 1 or 2 moves without executing a combat technique. Having no other choice, he could only chip away at the formation. As the number of players dwindled, Blackwater's members fell into an endless panic. Those standing at the outer layer of the defensive circle in particular, were trembling with fear, dreading becoming the next sacrifice. Feng was simply too fast. Not only were his appearances sudden, but even his attacks were impossible to detect. Moreover, by the time they began launching their counterattacks, Feng had long since disappeared. Yet they also weren't allowed to give chase. These guild elites and experts finally came to understand what an expert really was. Compared to Feng, Those experts that boasted the ability to go up against 10 or 100 opponents by themselves were simply weaklings. If faced against those kinds of experts, Blackwater's members could still put up a modicum of resistance. Feng, however, instilled so much fear into their group of several hundred players that they did not even dare to move. Moreover, when he was attacking them, the only thing they could do was await their impending doom. Time passed by quickly. Due to the defensive formation, Abandoned Wave and the others advanced at a crawl. Consequently, Feng managed to gradually whittle the team of several hundred players down to just 100 or so. Right now, however, the group was only 100 yards away from the ceiling crystal ball. Upon seeing the gigantic crystal at the peak of the tower, everyone with Abandoned Wave revealed expressions of joy and relief. As long as they shattered the crystal ball, the barrier surrounding the town would disappear once again. They could then find a hiding place and use their return scrolls instead of just quietly waiting for their deaths here. Good. We're close enough. All assassins and rangers, charge forward and destroy the crystal. Everyone else, continue advancing in the defensive formation. Abandoned Wave, who had been in stealth all this time, commanded softly. Previously they had been too far away from the crystal ball. Feng would have wiped them out long before anyone could even enter within attack range of the crystal ball. Now that only 100 yards separated them from the crystal ball, if Feng stayed back to try to target Abandoned Wave, the crystal ball would undoubtedly be destroyed. However, if he chose to target those assassins and rangers instead, those in the defensive formation could speed up their advance. Abandoned Wave could even use the opportunity to sneak away himself. Currently, Zero Wings members had already surrounded the obelisk. If not for the other members of Blackwater incessantly trying to charge into the obelisk, the other Zero Wing members would have long since rushed up here. Immediately, over a dozen assassins and rangers raced madly for the crystal ball. Having no other choice, Feng could only chase these players. Fortunately, the path towards the crystal ball was not very wide. Before the assassins and rangers even entered within 40 yards of the crystal ball, Feng had already disposed of them all. However, this situation also allowed Abandoned Wave and the others to advance a significant distance. Right now, the group was only 60 yards away from the crystal ball. We won. At this moment, Abandoned Wave was ecstatic. Although they were still 60 yards away, ranged players had an attack range of 40 yards. Hence, realistically, they only needed to cross another 20 yards. There was no way Feng could wipe out their team of nearly 100 elite and expert players before they crossed these 20 yards. As long as the magic barrier was gone, Abandoned Wave could immediately bring the loot back to Star Moon City. Although he had suffered massive losses in this war, the loot from Lancelot should offset a considerable amount of his losses. Previously, he had browsed through the items they obtained. Several among them would be of massive help to a guild's development. At the very least, Blackwater would be much better off than Zero Wing. After all, the latter had lost Stone Forest Town. However, just as Abandoned Wave was jubilating, divine swords suddenly began raining down on his group, damage of over -10,000 appearing above everyone's heads. This move was none other than Feng's Skywheel Sword, a skill capable of sealing all enemies within a 20-yard radius for 4 seconds. As a result of this attack, Abandoned Wave was also revealed. At this moment, Abandoned Wave stared at Feng, who stood 40 yards away from the crystal ball, in shock. Impossible. How can he use skills again? 10 minutes shouldn't have passed yet. Abandoned Wave was filled with confusion. Peerless and Singular Burial were similarly dumbfounded at this situation. However, Feng did not give them much time to react. He immediately raised Killing Ray and executed Lightning Edge. Although Abandoned Wave was correct in that less than 10 minutes had passed since Feng was silenced, he had forgotten that players had their own natural resistances. Feng's magic resistance could give even magical class NPCs a headache. Magical resistance not only reduced the magic damage players received but also weakened the side effects of magic. In reality, while Abandoned Wave was focused on figuring out how to destroy the ceiling crystal, Feng was buying time for himself. In the end, Feng made it at the last moment. One wave came after another, countless lightning bolts devouring everyone. Despite Abandoned Wave activating Wind Steps and Vanish, he still could not last through the 5-second duration of Lightning Edge. By the time the skill ended, only Feng and a pile of loot remained on the rooftop of the obelisk. Word of Abandoned Waves and the others' deaths quickly spread to everyone fighting desperately inside Stone Forest Town. The death of the commander would affect a guild's performance considerably. This situation also wiped out the last hope Blackwater's members held. Their morale plummeted, making them much easier to deal with. Meanwhile, Feng himself had collected all the loot Abandoned Waves group had dropped and began arranging them one by one. Midway, however, he noticed an item in his bag that captured his attention. The item was a square silver token engraved with the image of a lion. There were also a few words written on it. Town Promotion Order. Chapter 1100. Overlord of Star Moon. Hellscythe Undersea Vampire. Chapter 1100. Overlord of Star Moon. In front of a temple lined with pillars, a team of 20 players was currently resting atop the stone steps. A short distance away from these players was a two-headed bear over 10 meters in height. If one paid close attention to the bear, one would discover it to be a level 60 Grand Lord. Even a 100-man elite team of the same level would be no match for something like this. Yet this 20-man team actually defeated it. The highest-leveled player in this team was already level 42, with the majority being level 41. As for the equipment they wore, even the most inferior piece was level 40 Dark Gold equipment. This was a team that could rank at the top even in super guilds. However, every one of these people was an independent player. None of them belonged to a guild. Big Sis Endless, what happened? A level 41 female cleric asked when she noticed a surprised expression suddenly appearing on Ling Jingxuan's face. It's nothing. I just read an interesting message, that's all, Ling Jingxian replied, smiling. An interesting message? What is it? The female cleric could not help but ask curiously. Very few things could catch the interest of Ling Jingxian. Generally, anything that could do so was a considerably amazing matter. Blackwater has just been annihilated by Zero Wing. Most likely news of this matter will quickly spread throughout God's domain, Ling Jingxian answered. The way she spoke made it seem as if this matter was none of her business. Annihilated. At this time, a level 42 Guardian Knight carrying a snow-white round shield on his back joined in on the conversation. Surprised, he continued, there must be a mistake, right? I heard that the Blackwater Guild is considerably powerful. It even has the Blackwater Corporation backing it. How can it possibly lose so miserably? The term annihilated was very rarely used for guild wars. After all, with so many players participating in the war, not to mention annihilation, even trying to wipe out 70% or 80% of the enemy's forces was an extremely difficult proposition. Meanwhile, annihilated was generally used only when more than 95% of a belligerent's forces had been eliminated. In order to obtain such an outcome, one of the two sides in the conflict usually had to be many times stronger than the other. Shaking her head, Ling Jingxian asserted, Blackwater has indeed suffered total annihilation. And it was not only Blackwater but also the armies dispatched by Heaven's Burial and Pantheon. Not a single player from those three guilds managed to leave Stone Forest Town alive. Upon hearing Ling Jingxuan's words, everyone on the team was stupefied. As Blackwater was merely an upstart guild, annihilation was certainly a possibility. However, what about Pantheon? That was a super guild. When had it ever suffered annihilation? Just how powerful is Zero Wing? They are simply too amazing. Even other super guilds have never managed to annihilate Pantheon's armies. Just how did Zero Wing manage to do it? With this, Zero Wing is set for life. They will definitely cause a storm in God's domain. However, I'm guessing that Pantheon won't take this lying down. After all, Zero Wing has used them as a stepping stone. Pantheon definitely will not let Zero Wing off the hook in the future. I wonder what rank Zero Wing will get during this year's Virtual Gaming Guild annual evaluation. It is very likely that Zero Wing will be evaluated as a first-rate guild. However, after this incident I can't say for sure. I heard that 2 super first-rate guilds have been going downhill recently. They might even get replaced at this rate. I don't think it will be possible for Zero Wing to become a super first-rate guild. However, its position in this year's top 5 rookie guilds should be secure. Right, Endless, seeing as you are paying such close attention to Zero Wing, do you have a friend in Zero Wing, perhaps? Although everyone present was an independent player, their understanding of the inner workings of the virtual gaming world was not one bit lacking in comparison to that of members of large guilds. They knew just how powerful super guilds were. It was truly rare to see an upstart guild capable of such results. Friend. After giving the question some thought, Ling Jingxian answered seriously, something like that. In any case, I am certainly concerned about Zero Wing. Due to Abandoned Wave's defeat, the entire Blackwater Guild was in an uproar. Even the upper echelon of the Blackwater Corporation had asked for her to attend a meeting to plan how to quickly redeem this humiliation in the near term. After all, this was the Blackwater Guild's first major war. It would have been fine if they had merely suffered defeat. The crucial point was that they had been annihilated. Even if they managed to destroy Stone Forest Town and inflicted immense damages on Zero Wing, this was still not an outcome to be proud of. In the public's view, the only reason for Blackwater's destruction of Stone Forest Town was its inability to obtain the town for itself. Apocalypse Empire, the Imperial Capital's Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's residence. They wiped out Blackwater? Phoenix Rain felt somewhat skeptical when she read the message she just received. Zero Wing's opponents this time had included 200,000 monsters, over 100,000 Blackwater elite members, 50,000 Heaven's Burial elite members, and 3 core legions of Pantheon, one of which was even the famous Red Jade Legion. In the end, however, Zero Wing still managed to come out on top. No matter how she looked at it, this outcome was somewhat unrealistic. For Zero Wing to have achieved precisely this result was simply unbelievable. Big Sis Rain, should we still make a visit to White River City? Blue Phoenix asked. The competition for Thunder Island this time was considerably intense. Let alone the power of just the Phoenix Pavilion, even if they used the full power of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, their chances of obtaining the rights to the island would still be slim. Moreover, compared to the Town of Beginnings which they controlled, Thunder Island was much more important. Of course we're going. The more Phoenix Rain read the report in her hands, the more joyous she felt. Originally, she had not been that confident about the matter of Thunder Island. However, after seeing Zero Wing's information, they might have a chance at victory after all. Meanwhile, in Star Moon Kingdom, all the official forums had long since exploded. Practically every player in the kingdom was discussing the war. Blackwater and Heaven's Burial had lost miserably this time. This was especially true for Blackwater. Many guild members were already expressing their dissatisfaction with the leadership in the war. Within just 10 minutes of the war's end, over 10,000 players had withdrawn from the guild, many of them elite players. In addition, the fall of Blackwater and Heaven's Burial allowed the Star Alliance, which had been suppressed all this time, to rise up once again. Meanwhile, on Zero Wing's side, due to its massive victory, many large guilds that initially had designs on the guild gave up entirely. Overwhelming Smile in particular had already begun shifting its focus to other countries and no longer tried to develop in the cities around White River City. For a time, no guild in Star Moon Kingdom dared make an enemy out of Zero Wing. This situation allowed Zero Wing to become the uncontested overlord of Star Moon Kingdom. The only fly in the ointment was the loss of Stone Forest Town. This loss greatly depressed the effects of the Zero Wing's hard-earned victory. However, just as the various large guilds in Star Moon Kingdom were secretly celebrating Zero Wing's loss, a surprising situation occurred in Stone Forest Town. The evil energy polluting the town was actually starting to weaken and dissipate gradually. Chapter 1101. Benefits After a Great War. Hellscythe Underserved Empire. Chapter 1101. Benefits After a Great War. The dissipation of the evil energy quickly attracted the attention of the independent players outside Stone Forest Town. What? Didn't they say that evil energy won't ever dissipate? Based on the information I found, in order to remove evil energy, one needs to sever the source. Could Zero Wing have secretly dealt with the source already? That's not right. The evil energy this time should have originated from Black Ridge Town. However, Black Ridge Town is still the same right now. How did Zero Wing do it, then? Everyone was discussing this development. Very quickly, word of this situation spread throughout the entire Star Moon Kingdom. Star Moon City, Blackwater's residence. Impossible. How did they manage to remove the evil energy? Abandoned Wave practically screamed when he read the report he just received shortly after resurrecting. Zero Wing must be faking this information. I can guarantee that the evil energy is impossible to remove. Unlike curses, evil energy could not be cleansed. It was a kind of chaotic energy. Like a contagious virus, it would automatically transform other forms of energy into evil energy. Without eliminating the source, removing the evil energy polluting Stone Forest Town was simply impossible. However, removing the source was easier said than done. Even he did not know the source's exact location. If it was really located in Black Ridge Town, the monster-infested town was not a place current players could approach. Moreover, evil energy was extremely harmful to players. If players immersed themselves in evil energy for long periods, they would get infected and fall into a weakened state. Players exposed to evil energy for too long would even turn into monsters. If that happened, they would be barred from logging into God's domain for a considerable amount of time. Due to these dire consequences, cleaning out the monsters in Black Ridge Town was extremely difficult. Hence he firmly believed that Zero Wing could not remove the evil energy polluting Stone Forest Town. The only possibility was that Zero Wing was releasing fake news. After all, Zero Wing had previously registered plenty of members at the battle arena they constructed, collecting a hefty sum in membership fees. If the battle arena was gone, those members could seek compensation for their losses. Therefore, the intention behind the release of this fake news was undoubtedly the appeasement of those members. Guild leader, it's true. Our spies in Zero Wing have already confirmed this fact. The evil energy inside the town is indeed gradually dissipating. At this rate, it will take less than 5 days for all the evil energy in the town to disappear completely. By then, Stone Forest Town will be able to resume its operations, Qin Miyun said, an ugly expression on her face as she took out another document. Not only had the Blackwater Guild lost a considerable number of elite members, but the guild's prestige in Star Moon Kingdom had also fallen to rock bottom. Members were withdrawing from the guild every minute. Most likely they would have to recuperate for a long time in order to return to their previous state. Originally, with Zero Wing having lost Stone Forest Town, Blackwater would have been able to leverage its funds and background to quickly surpass Zero Wing. However, now that Stone Forest Town was all right, whether Blackwater could even surpass Zero Wing's development speed was in question. This was not an outcome that the upper echelon of the Blackwater Corporation was willing to see. This won't do. I cannot let Stone Forest Town continue existing in this world. Although Abandoned Wave was unwilling to accept the truth of this matter, the facts were already before him. In that case, he needed to take action right away. Notify that man immediately. Tell him I'll try to provide him with the players he needs. However, I want him to have his monster army thoroughly obliterate Stone Forest Town within 5 days. Qin Miyun could not help but frown at these words. She never imagined that Abandoned Wave had already lost his prudence to such a degree. Nurturing all those monsters was not easy. Any players sacrificed to them would be unable to log into God's domain for several days. Blackwater's elite and expert players had already lost a level from this war. If they were sacrificed again, what are you still standing there for? Abandoned Wave glared at Qin Miyun. Don't forget that I am still the guild leader right now. Helpless to do anything about the situation, Qin Miyun had no choice but to contact the bandaged man. Black Flame, just you wait. This time I will definitely make you pay a heavy price. Abandoned Wave laughed coldly as he looked out his window, his eyes staring in Stone Forest Town's direction. Inside Stone Forest Town, Zero Wing had also begun cleaning up the battlefield. This war had been considerably intense. Over half of Stone Forest Town's buildings lay in ruins. The guild residence was an irreparable mess. Even the battle arena had received significant damages and would take a considerable sum of money to repair. However, their gains far exceeded their losses. Although the army of 200,000 monsters had not dropped any weapons or equipment, they had dropped plenty of monster materials. The drops from Lord-rank monsters were rare materials that could be used to make weapons and equipment. In addition, monsters at the chieftain rank or above had a fixed chance of dropping a kind of gray crystal called the evil energy crystal. To ordinary players, this item would be garbage that they would sell to NPC merchants for spare change. However, Feng knew the real use of the evil energy crystals. This was something a master forger had discovered in the past. If one added evil energy crystals or magic crystals during the forging of weapons or equipment, there was a certain probability these crystals would give rise to magic patterns on the items produced. However, the enhancement effect was random. The enhancement might be to the item's basic attributes, its attack power or defense, or even its hidden attributes or additional skills. Hence, the evil energy crystal was highly sought after by forgers in the past. In Feng's previous life, there was even a case where a dark gold weapon produced using evil energy crystals received attributes nearly rivaling that of epic weapons. Compared to epic items, dark gold items were much easier to produce. Hence, in the past, a single evil energy crystal could easily sell for 10 gold coins. Even at this price, obtaining one was extremely difficult because after reaching the mid-late stage of the game, many players no longer equipped the weapons and equipment they got from monsters. Instead, they would use items tailor-made for them by forgers. Players would naturally hope that the weapons and equipment produced would be strong. Consequently, players swarmed to whichever kingdom the evil god's temple appeared in. Meanwhile, among the 200,000 monsters that assaulted Stone Forest Town, many were at chieftain rank or above. As a result, Zero Wing raked in a hefty profit, gathering 2,428 evil energy crystals in all. That was 24,280 gold coins at the very least. After including the other materials dropped by the monsters, they had earned more than enough money to repair Stone Forest Town. Not to mention, even after taking into account the weapons and equipment Zero Wing's members lost in the war, they had netted an additional 114,633 pieces of weapons and equipment from the combined army of Blackwater, Heaven's Burial and Pantheon. The most inferior items were level 35 bronze equipment with even level 40 dark gold equipment in the mix. Even after giving out spoils as compensation and rewards to guild members, the amount left was still staggering. After Feng read the statistics reports Aqua Rose and Gentle Snow gave him, he fell into a daze for a long time. Although he had experienced plenty of large wars in the past, none of them had been as profitable as this one. Guild leader, people from the secret pavilion are asking to meet you. Chapter 1102. Constructing a Holy Land. Hellscythe Underservampire. Chapter 1102. Constructing a Holy Land. They're looking for me? Feng could not help but recall the offer Yuan Tiexin had made him before. He then continued, have them wait at Candlelight's main headquarters for now. I'll head over shortly. This war had damaged Stone Forest Town beyond recognition. Most likely, the town would not be able to resume normal operations for a considerable amount of time. In other words, Zero Wing would lose a major source of income. Meanwhile, reconstruction would cost a lot of coins. However, selling the evil energy crystals would undoubtedly be a very foolish move. Moreover, the function of the crystals was still unknown to everyone but himself. How could he possibly reveal it to others? Yet, just the income from the Candlelight trading firm was not enough to fund the reconstruction. Not to mention he also required money to build his city. There was indeed a need to have a proper chat with the secret pavilion. Among the superpowers in God's domain, the secret pavilion was undoubtedly the richest. Just the income from the expert lists it released every week was an astronomical amount. There were also the consultation fees it earned from selling information. It would be foolish of him not to take advantage of the situation when such a wealthy client delivered themselves up to his doorstep. Just as Aqua Rose was notifying the secret pavilion about the meeting place, Gentle Snow walked over and reported, Guild leader, many independent players are currently voicing their wishes for us to reopen Stone Forest Town right away, particularly the players that are members of the battle arena. They are asking for us to immediately reopen the town's battle arena. Otherwise, they are going to ask for their magic crystals back. Should we prioritize the repairs of the battle arena first to appease these members? If they continue making a fuss, there will most likely be many players seeking to withdraw their membership. As the vice guild leader of Zero Wing, Gentle Snow had some detailed information regarding Zero Wing. So she was very clear just how poor Zero Wing currently was. In the past, she had always thought that Zero Wing was definitely the wealthiest guild in Starmoon Kingdom. After all, it had the Candlelight Trading Firm and Stone Forest Town providing it with income. The amount of coins these two places raked in each day could make even the guild leaders of first-rate guilds envious. However, when she took a look at Zero Wing's accounts, they might as well be a blank sheet of paper. It really made her wonder just where the money Zero Wing earned was going. Gentle Snow had no idea that while Zero Wing was indeed earning a lot of coins, it was spending even more. The expenditure of gold coins was in the tens of thousands. Are they in such a hurry? After giving the situation some thought, Feng chuckled and said, "All right then. Tell them that they may withdraw if they want to. However, once the town is reconstructed, the membership fee for the battle arena will be increased to 1,200 magic crystals. Moreover, rental for the combat rooms will be doubled. If they wish to withdraw their membership, I very much welcome them to do so." This, Gentle Snow could not help but stare at Feng stunned. They would practically be chasing away their customers if they did so. Previously, the membership they charged was already out of reach for most independent players. Only a fool would be willing to pay 1,200 magic crystals. Not to mention if they doubled the rent of the combat rooms, it might even affect business at the battle arena. Relax. Just tell them as is. Feng waved his hand, not bothering with additional explanations. Previously, he had focused on running Stone Forest Town as a small town that even ordinary players could enjoy. Now, however, he had changed his mind. Feng never dreamed that Lancelot would actually drop such an item. Although this town promotion order was only secret silver rank, it was enough to promote a basic town directly into an intermediate town. This was a treasure that many guilds dreamed of obtaining. No guild would be willing to trade it away even for 20 epic items. Getting a town promoted was a challenging proposition in God's domain. It was also very time-consuming. Any slight instability or security problem might cause several days' worth of effort to go to waste. With the town promotion order, however, Feng would be able to promote Stone Forest Town into an intermediate town, bypassing the NPC population requirement altogether. He would also be able to hire up to 2,000 NPC guards. At the same time, he could construct real defensive structures instead of basic ones like the defense turret. The size of the town would also increase by multiple times. With this, Stone Forest Town would be able to accommodate many more players instead of having players squeeze against each other as they walked through the streets. A larger town would definitely attract more players. He was not worried about losing visitors at all. Once Stone Forest Town was promoted, he could also level up all the structures inside it, expanding them significantly. Take the battle arena for example. Currently it was only a 5-story building. Once the town was promoted, however, the battle arena could have up to 8 floors. After including the underground level, the battle arena would have 9 floors in total. With this, the number of customers they could receive each day would increase substantially. By then, Stone Forest Town would become a true money-making machine. However, there was a prerequisite to all of this. And that was money. Moreover, it had to be a considerable sum. Upon hearing Feng's response, Gentle Snow helplessly informed everyone of the new rules in Stone Forest Town. As for Feng himself, he used a return scroll to travel to White River City. The new rules immediately enraged many independent players. Zero Wing is simply going overboard. Who would be willing to pay a membership fee of 1,200 magic crystals? They are even doubling the rent now. Do they think our money grows on trees? I'm going to get a refund. Only a fool would visit Stone Forest Town in the future. If I had that kind of money, I might as well spend it at the Divine Colosseum. The spies Blackwater planted in Stone Forest Town began making a ruckus over the new rules, though many independent players did find their words reasonable. Although the mana density in Stone Forest Town had indeed increased slightly and would be beneficial for improving their strength, the new prices were simply beyond the reach of ordinary players. Even elite players would not be able to afford to train in the battle arena for long periods. For a time, many battle arena members requested refunds, feeling that Zero Wing was trying to cheat them out of their money. While Aqua Rose and Gentle Snow were grappling with this matter, Feng was seated on a sofa inside a VIP room on the second floor of White River City's Adventurers Association, leisurely browsing through the designs of intermediate towns. Players had many templates of intermediate towns to choose from, and each template had their strong points. Likewise, different templates had different prices. Some templates were more suited to economic development through NPCs. Such templates allowed the town's popularity to increase much more rapidly. Similarly, there were templates geared towards economic development through players. In addition, some templates facilitated the hiring of powerful NPC guards. In any case, many kinds of templates were available depending on the kind of a town that players wished to construct. Unlike capturing a town, promoting a town cost much less. Taking a careful look, Feng noticed some templates that were only made available to him due to his City Protector title. Even so, none of them could match the town design dropped by Lancelot. Feng then turned to the NPC beauty standing at a side and took out an ancient design from his bag. Softly he asked, "If I wish to use this design here, how much will it cost?" Chapter 1103, Grandmaster Design. Hellscythe _ Fluffy Goblin. Chapter 1103, Grandmaster Design. Taking a look at the design Feng revealed, the NPC beauty's eyes widened as the design demanded her full attention. Only after some time did she open her mouth and say, "Lord Protector, the quality of these construction materials and level of skill required are extremely high for this design. I cannot provide an immediate answer. I will have to ask the association leader to appraise the design. Would my lord be willing to wait here for a short moment?" "Even you can't give an exact price?" Feng asked the female senior administrator. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation. In the Adventurers Association, NPCs were categorized into ordinary staff member, administrator, senior administrator, vice association master, and association master, each catering to adventurers from 1-star to 5-star status. Anyone capable of becoming a senior administrator even had the insight and knowledge to rival NPC lifestyle masters. Although this design is tattered, I am certain that a Grandmaster produced it. A Grandmaster's town design is outside of the scope of my appraising abilities. In our branch, only the association master can appraise this, the senior administrator explained, smiling bitterly. "All right, let the association master appraise it then." Feng nodded. When promoting a town in God's domain, choosing the design was only one part of the process, while using the design to construct the town was another. The promotion process was not as simple as capturing a basic town. One could say that a town only truly began its operation after becoming an intermediate town. The Adventurers Association normally provided players with many template designs to choose from, their prices usually ranging from 1,000 to 3,000 gold. The Adventurers Association would only offer several master designs to someone who enjoyed the status of a 4-star adventurer, such as himself. These templates could cost anywhere from 4,000 to 5,000 gold. Master designs were roughly 15% better than those of normal designs. Although 15% seemed like a small difference, it would be massively effective in an intermediate town. For example, when that bonus was used to increase the town's popularity among NPCs, a town which could originally gain 100 popularity points each day would gain 115 points with a master design. Normally, a lot of manpower and resources were required to gain that additional 15 points. In addition, master designs attracted more quests and events that would raise the town's popularity, allowing the town to reach the next rank far more quickly. Of course, players could opt to produce their own town designs. Only, the majority of players' designs wouldn't come close to the Adventurers Association's ordinary templates. Extremely few lucky players or genius designers could draft a town design better than the available templates. If a player created such a design, the various large guilds in God's domain would fight over purchasing it, offering roughly 3,000 gold. If the design reached the master standard, the minimum price would be 5,000 gold. However, extremely few players could create designs of such standards. These people were even rarer than master forgers. Among the 28 items Lancelot had dropped, 20 were epic materials. Of the remaining 8, 3 were epic weapons and pieces of equipment: a cloth armor headdress, a staff, and a pair of plate armor bracers. The bracers were the best among them in Feng's opinion. Angry Tyrant, plate armor, bracers, epic rank. Level 40, level 100. Equipment requirement: strength 1200. Defense plus 755, level 40. Strength plus 60, agility plus 32, endurance plus 35. Ignore levels plus 5. Ignore 20% of the target's defense. Increase the effective strength by 15%. Additional passive skill 1 dash. Chapter 1104. Intermediate Town. Hellscythe _ Fluffy Goblin. Chapter 1104. Intermediate Town. Feng felt his head ache when he heard the administrator's price. In reality, this was considered cheap. An intermediate town shouldn't have appeared at this stage of the game. In the past, the first intermediate town had only appeared after mainstream players had reached level 60. During that time, Tier 2 expert players were commonplace. Right now, however, mainstream players weren't even level 40. Guild mainstream players could earn money far more quickly at level 60 than level 40. Following which, Feng gave up on constructing his town and stored his Grandmaster town design before leaving the VIP room. Town reconstruction was only one of the benefits of an intermediate town. Reconstructing the town was not necessary to reopen it to the public. Currently, Feng lacked coins. Hence he could set this matter aside for now. In any case, Stone Forest Town had already been successfully promoted to an intermediate town. The Grandmaster design wasn't going anywhere. He could simply operate Stone Forest Town as usual. It would not be too late to reconstruct the town after a few more days of earning money. In the Candlelight Trading Firm's second-floor lounge, Yuan Tiexin and Purple Jade both sat quietly inside the lounge. Uncle Yuan, I'm afraid that we'll have trouble completing this trade. For some reason, the evil energy in Stone Forest Town is gradually dissipating. It is only a matter of time before Stone Forest Town recovers. Zero Wing won't be interested in our conditions, Purple Jade said after she finished reading the information the secret pavilion had sent her. Smiling, she said, Blackwater, Heaven's Burial, and Pantheon have suffered greatly. Not only have they failed to obtain Stone Forest Town, but they have also lost all of the members that they had dispatched. This is the first time Pantheon has suffered such a massive loss since joining God's domain. They definitely have a mess to clean up. The relationship between the virtual gaming world's superpowers was not as peaceful as everyone thought. If given the opportunity, these powers would be more than willing to choke their rivals to death. After all, every game's resources were finite. If they had one less competitor, they could claim far more resources for themselves. Pantheon had lost 1 trump card legion and 2 core legions in this war. That was a total of 3,000 experts. This would be a significant blow to any super guild. The loss of the trump card legion was particularly severe. Any player capable of joining a super guild's trump card legion could reach the trial tower's 6th floor at the very minimum. Such experts were considerably rare in first-rate guilds. In the eyes of ordinary players, those who reached the 5th floor were already considered experts, much less the 6th floor. Zero Wing is truly unpredictable. Yuan Tiexin shook his head and laughed. No wonder they aren't afraid of mutual destruction with Blackwater. However, this doesn't affect our plans in any way. Even if Stone Forest Town recovers, it will take a considerable amount of time and resources. Meanwhile, Candlelight Trading Firm cannot wait that long. It is even more so for Zero Wing. He had not talked through his hat. Currently, both the Blackwater and Heavenly Trading Firms were pressuring the Candlelight Trading Firm. Although Candlelight still held considerable influence in Star Moon Kingdom's market and maintained its daily traffic, how long would that last? Both the Blackwater and Heavenly trading firms were marking down their prices and selling their items at a loss. They could also keep this up for a considerable amount of time due to their abundant funds and powerful connections. However, what about the Candlelight trading firm? The Candlelight trading firm had neither abundant funds nor powerful connections. If Zero Wing only continued its development after Blackwater recovered, the guild would be in big trouble. If Blackwater decided to take action against Zero Wing again, it would take more precautions and would not be caught off guard as it had been in this war. Furthermore, Zero Wing currently had an agreement with the Secret Pavilion to hand over the bronze mounts and strengthening devices. These items were considerably expensive. Obtaining them would not be that easy. If Zero Wing wished to earn more coins, working with the Secret Pavilion was undoubtedly the best decision. Just as Yuan Tiexin and Purple Jade were quietly discussing Zero Wing's situation, Feng, currently disguised as Black Flame, entered the lounge. What a powerful mental oppression. Yuan Tiexin was shocked when he laid eyes on Feng. Meeting the man in person felt massively different than watching Feng on the screen. Although Feng had hidden his weapons and equipment's glow effects and sheathed his aura, Yuan Tiexin, with his bountiful experience, immediately sensed the dangerous atmosphere coming from Feng. This swordsman felt like a dragon lurking in the water. 6 epic items? Upon closer inspection, Yuan Tiexin's lips involuntarily twitched. In God's domain, the difference between epic items and dark gold items wasn't limited to their aura effects. There was also a huge difference in the materials used to produce them. Even if Feng tried to hide his items' glow effects, players who were familiar with the materials could easily recognize the item's quality. Yuan Tiexin had researched the various materials available in God's domain precisely to gauge others' strength. After all, there were too many experts who preferred to keep a low profile in God's domain. If he knew how to determine equipment quality, should he come across an independent expert, he might be able to recruit them into the Secret Pavilion. As for his enemies, he could use this knowledge to gauge their strength and respond appropriately. Uncle Yuan, are you sure? Purple Jade was slightly doubtful when she heard Yuan Tiexin's words. Even their guild leader did not have as many as 6 epic items on him. The most he had around 3. Epic items were simply too rare. Even Grand Lords rarely dropped them. Hence even now she only had 2 epic items. Even so, many of the guild's upper echelons were incredibly jealous of her. Of the 2 epic items, one was a weapon while the other was a pair of shoes. She had obtained the shoes during a fortuitous encounter. However, that encounter had cost her a level and plenty of effort. As for the weapon, the guild had given it to her due to her status as the guild's top genius. Even a genius like Cold Autumn had not received an epic item. Yet Feng had 6 epic items. Anyone would question this matter. Do you doubt this old man's judgment? Yuan Tiexin could not help but roll his eyes at Purple Jade. Although he was no match for the little girl in terms of potential, he could rank among the top 5 in the guild when it came to judging item quality. 6 epic items. Is this the secret to Black Flame's strength? As Purple Jade quietly watched Feng approach, her will to challenge the man to a fight was immediately extinguished. Only those who used epic items knew their strength. If 2 combatants had roughly equal combat standards, the one with 6 epic items would trample over the one with only 2. Furthermore, her standards were weaker than Feng's. By challenging him right now, she'd only ask for a beating. After Feng took his seat and before Yuan Tiexin spoke, he received a message from his guild. Stone Forest Town has been promoted to an intermediate town. Chapter 1105, Golden Cities. Hellscythe _ Fluffy Goblin. Chapter 1105, Golden Cities. Yuan Tiexin fell into a daze after he read the message. An intermediate town. Although the Secret Pavilion had captured many towns, they were all still far from becoming intermediate towns. Uncle Yuan, what happened? Purple Jade asked curiously when she noticed Yuan Tiexin's long stretch of silence despite Feng's arrival. Yuan Tiexin finally reacted, returning his gaze to Feng with a perplexed look. Just when he thought that he had uncovered all of Zero Wing's secrets, he felt as if he knew nothing about the guild once again. Did Zero Wing truly lack a background as he had thought? Yuan Tiexin did not respond to Purple Jade's question. Instead he smiled at Feng and said, "I really must congratulate you, Guild Leader Black Flame. Not only did you defeat Blackwater, but you've also promoted Stone Forest Town to an intermediate town." Although Yuan Tiexin smiled, inwardly he was extremely frustrated. Now that Zero Wing ruled over an intermediate town, he had no choice but to place greater importance on the guild. An intermediate town occupied far more land than a basic town. It also had more features. If one called Stone Forest Town a mountain of gold when it had been a basic town, then as an intermediate town it was a diamond mountain. Setting aside Stone Forest Town's proximity to the Stoneclaw Mountains, its battle arena alone could earn Zero Wing a fortune. Furthermore, plenty of companies would want to open their own virtual shops in the town. Previously, Stone Forest Town was as valuable as 4 or 5 basic towns. The town attracted many companies. Unfortunately, Zero Wing's asking price had been too high, causing many of these companies to shy away. However, now that Stone Forest Town had become an intermediate town, even a fool could see its value. Most likely, Zero Wing's previous conditions would no longer deter companies' investments. Tons of companies would definitely be willing to invest in the town regardless of the cost. Right now, Zero Wing did not lack coins, credits, or players. It had even earned its prestige. Zero Wing's future was limitless at this point. The conditions he had prepared to offer Zero Wing would most likely be of little interest to the guild now. "Thank you," Feng replied politely. He then smiled and continued, "If you have come to purchase the Magic Tower design, I'm sorry to say that Zero Wing has no intentions of selling it." Guild Leader Black Flame, you jest. The secret pavilion has already given up on purchasing the design. Instead, in exchange for constructing one magic tower for us, we would like to offer you high potential lands in 5 major cities, each with player populations in the millions. How about it? Yuan Tiexin asked. After giving the situation some thought, rather than trying to obtain the magic tower design, he would opt for the next best thing. However, when Purple Jade heard this, she was shocked. How valuable were major cities' high potential lands exactly? The various large guilds had already bought out these lands. They were impossible to purchase for a reasonable price, yet Yuan Tiexin had just offered 5 of the lands for one magic tower. "Your offer is quite tempting. However, I have to refuse," Feng responded, shaking his head. These 5 plots of land were easily worth 30 or 40,000 gold in total at the moment. Moreover, their value would undoubtedly rise as time passed. Even if he rented these lands out rather than use them himself, he could earn a hefty sum. However, his magic tower design only had 2 uses left. Among them, he had agreed to reserve one for the Town of Beginnings. Even if he traded the remaining magic tower for 5 high potential lands, the trade wouldn't profit the Candlelight trading firm over much. Yuan Tiexin asked, gritting his teeth. The secret pavilion was determined to obtain the magic tower. The guild leader had specifically reiterated this in their conversations. "I want lands in these cities. There are a total of 20 locations. I believe the secret pavilion should be capable of obtaining them." Feng then revealed a list of several minor NPC cities. Most of these cities had populations below 100,000, with some as low as 30,000. These cities were also spread out, covering 11 kingdoms and 2 empires. When Yuan Tiexin heard that Feng wanted 20 plots of land, he nearly cursed at the man. However, when he read the list and noticed that all of the names belonged to minor cities, he was stupefied. Even if he added all of the cities' player populations, the total was less than 2 million. Moreover, the lands in these locations did not have much potential. He could not fathom what was going through Feng's mind. However, this was good news for the secret pavilion. "Guild Leader Black Flame, is this all that you want?" Yuan Tiexin asked. He doubted that Feng was so generous. "Of course not. I still want a 20,000 gold construction fee." Seeing Yuan Tiexin's skepticism, Feng had no choice but to state a more reasonable price. Truthfully, his price was quite high. Even Feng thought that he was ripping off the secret pavilion. Although these 20 plots of land were not particularly expensive, they served a great purpose. However, even if he wanted to buy these lands himself, he could not. Other large and small guilds already occupied them. These guilds would only part with the lands at a reasonable price if an existence like the secret pavilion took action. In the past, these land cities had been known as Golden Cities. These cities had earned that name due to their proximity to high-level maps that provided diamond wood. Diamond wood was a rare type of wood in God's domain. It was specifically used to produce high-ranking boats. Even if diamond wood were used to produce a common speedboat, that boat's standards would almost be on the same level as bronze speedboats. Hence, diamond wood had been incredibly popular among the various large guilds and seafaring adventurer teams. Unfortunately, diamond wood was extremely rare. Many kingdoms and empires lacked maps that provided the wood, including Star Moon Kingdom. Now that he had his own medium shipyard, he had to prepare. In the past, he hadn't had this opportunity. Now that the chance was before him, how could he miss it? Lands in these cities had sold for astronomical prices during his previous life. Back then, 50,000 gold had been the bare minimum to purchase one plot of land. Unlike ordinary materials, players could not store the wood meant for crafting boats in their bag space. Rather, players had to transport the wood at its full size. Moreover, even when the wood reached an NPC town or city, it was still considerably troublesome to transport the wood to its final destination. Of course, players could utilize teleportation arrays to transport the wood. Only the price of teleporting a single log was far higher than teleporting a player. In the past, the most common transportation method had been transport carriages. However, it would be foolish to transport a single log each trip. Hence, players usually stockpiled the wood before hauling it all at once. However, NPC towns and cities did not permit players to leave piles of items on the streets. If anyone dared to do so, their items would be confiscated immediately. Due to this, the various large guilds had needed warehouses to store the materials. To put it simply, guilds in the past had spent 50,000 gold to purchase warehouses for their diamond wood. After the others left, Feng looked to melancholic smile and asked, "What's the situation with the Blackwater and Heavenly trading firms?" Before the war, both the Blackwater and Heavenly trading firms had waged a crazy price war with the Candlelight, hoping to push Candlelight out of Star Moon Kingdom's market while they whittle down Zero Wing's financial strength. Chapter 1109, Holy Land at Sea. Halscythe Undersher Fluffy Goblin. Chapter 1109, Holy Land at Sea. Borrow some of our players. Feng gave Phoenix Rain. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was a super first-rate guild. The pavilion recruited a large number of members each year, and they had tons of guild-nurtured experts. Yet that same Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had sought him out to borrow manpower. This was inconceivable. That's right. I wish to borrow 10 people to help me with a task. Once the task is complete, I will pay you 5,000 magic crystals. If the task fails, I will pay 1,000 crystals. Of course, I will offer additional compensation should any deaths occur during my loan, Phoenix Rain said, smiling as she nodded. May I know what guild leader Black Flame thinks of this? Normally, when hiring experts to help with a quest, payment was in the form of either credits or coins. An ordinary expert would only cost several gold to hire, while even apex experts only cost around 100 gold. Meanwhile, she had offered magic crystals as payment. Magic crystals were far more valuable than coins. It was a hard currency. The various large guilds already treated magic crystals as a strategic resource. They might be able to purchase 10 or 20 magic crystals from independent adventurer teams or small workshops, but when the numbers climbed into the triple digits, it was practically impossible to find enough on the market. 5,000 magic crystals was a considerable sum for any large guild. Some large guilds didn't even have so many magic crystals in their warehouses. Now, by loaning 10 of its experts, Zero Wing could potentially earn 5,000 magic crystals. This was definitely a tempting offer. Phoenix Pavilion Master, can you reveal the details of the task? Feng was indeed tempted after listening to the offer. Aside from running a guild, his goal in establishing the Zero Wing workshop was to accept commissions. However, requests like Phoenix Reigns were rare. That's fine. The task is very simple. I just need Zero Wing's members to defend an ancient tower on Thunder Island, preventing anyone else from capturing it. As Thunder Island is a very special place, only a very limited number of players can be there at a time. When the time comes, our enemies won't be able to dispatch much manpower. It would be a miracle if they could send 20 or 30 players. As long as Zero Wing's members defend their assigned tower until the pavilion's main force captures a monster encampment, the task will be a success, Phoenix Reign explained after giving the matter some thought. News of Thunder Island had long since been spread among God's domain's superpowers. It was no big secret. Currently, to secure a larger share of Thunder Island, the various superpowers were recruiting helpers from all over the place. Some had even hired extremely powerful independent players. This was all due to the unique conditions to capture Thunder Island. It was not an issue that could be resolved with a large army. Rather than quantity, one needed quality. Hence, she was asking for Zero Wing's help. Zero Wing had performed magnificently in the Dark Arena. Its members definitely qualified to take part in the battle on Thunder Island. In addition, she had found plenty of apex experts elsewhere. Although she might not occupy Thunder Island exclusively, she should have no problems taking control of a small portion. When the initial skirmish was over, her next step would be to fight the other super guilds slowly. Thunder Island? Information about Thunder Island immediately surfaced in Feng's mind. Thunder Island was in an extremely dangerous sea zone. That zone was known as the Sea of Death. One could find plenty of treasures and fortuitous encounters in the Sea of Death. There were even numerous ancient ruins in the zone. The abundant resources in the sea zone surpassed imagination. Only Feng's transfer point condition was somewhat difficult to agree to. For each monster encampment one captured on Thunder Island, they would earn 2 temporary guild transfer points in the town. She had already promised 1 transfer point to another large guild that had agreed to assist her. If not for said large guild, she would not have obtained so many entry passes in the first place. If she accepted Feng's offer, she had to secure 2 monster encampments. However, there were too many uncertainties. Moreover, Phoenix Reign found it hard to believe that Zero Wing had so many powerful experts capable of defending 2 ancient towers with just a team of 20. Is there some issue? Feng could not help but ask as he watched Phoenix Reign ponder his offer. Guild leader Black Flame, to tell you the truth, each captured monster encampment only provides 2 temporary guild transfer points. Among them, I have already promised 1 to the Firmament Guild. Although Firmament is only a first-rate guild, the guild has been developing its maritime strength. Currently, its navy is even stronger than many super first-rate guilds. If not for them, I wouldn't have obtained so many entry passes to begin with, Phoenix Reign explained. Firmament. Feng recalled the guild from his past. The Firmament Guild was indeed an overlord at sea. Firmament had occupied 2 coastal NPC cities, which had populations in the millions, very early in the game. These two cities served as the foundation for the guild to develop its maritime strength. In addition, Firmament had focused on developing its navy. Although overall, it was significantly weaker than super first-rate guilds, battles at sea did not rely on guild experts. The quantity and quality of the guild's ships also played a major role. In the past, even some super guilds had not been a match for Firmament's combat power at sea. It was no wonder why the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had managed to obtain so many entry passes, despite having recently begun its naval development. When will Thunder Island's contest begin? Feng asked. The contest will begin in 7 days. However, traveling to the island takes a full day, so we only have 6 days to prepare, Phoenix Rain replied as she gave Feng a quizzical look. She didn't understand why Feng had asked such a question. 7 days should be enough, Feng said, laughing. Phoenix Pavilion Master, how about I make you another offer? Give me 60 slots. As long as your side can hold 3 ancient towers, my side will capture a monster encampment for you. In return, I want 100,000 magic crystals or lands of equivalent value in addition to 1 temporary transfer point. What do you think? When Phoenix Rain and Blue Phoenix heard Feng's new proposal, they stared at him in shock. They both believed that Feng was insane. While 100,000 magic crystals was not a problem for them, they simply did not understand where Feng found his confidence to make such a bold claim. Based on her estimation, under the assumption that they could capture 3 ancient towers as planned, capturing a monster encampment required at least 100 apex experts. Although the guild seemed full of experts to ordinary players, in the eyes of superpowers, Zero Wing only had around 10 truly capable experts. How was Feng going to fill the 50 remaining slots? Even if he could dispatch another 50 capable experts, it was impossible to capture a monster encampment with just 60 players. Phoenix Pavilion Master, you originally planned to capture only 1 encampment, right? You should know that the likelihood of capturing a second is quite low. Even if you allow Zero Wing to fight for the second encampment, I'm sure you won't suffer much loss. If you are still not sure, I can sign an agreement. If Zero Wing fails to secure the second encampment, we will pay 100,000 magic crystals. How about it? Chapter 11-12, Midnight Tea Party. Hellscythe _ Fluffy Goblin. Chapter 11-12, Midnight Tea Party. Why would anyone else come here? A robust guardian knight carrying a round white shield on his back frowned when Feng's group appeared in the teleportation array. Leader, could they be here for the Fallen Ark as well? A female cleric asked worriedly. A beautiful woman wearing luxurious purple robes looked towards Feng's group of cloaked players and said nonchalantly, they shouldn't be. We rushed over here as soon as we received the message. Moreover, without the key, going there is useless. If they have any ill intentions, we can simply wipe them out. I guess you're right. If they wish to take action, we can use the opportunity to test our new weapons and equipment, another member said, laughing. Feng was also surprised when he noticed the team a short distance away, chatting merrily. He hadn't expected to find other players here at this stage of the game. Guild leader, those players are really strong. Fire Dance commented when she saw the independent players, a hint of caution flashing in her eyes. Although the other party only had 20 players, from their movements and auras, Fire Dance could tell that these people's combat standards were very high. These players were no weaker than the apex experts she had previously encountered. And this team had 20 such experts. Normally, only super guilds were capable of forming such a team, yet these players were all independent. With such strength, why have I never heard these people's names before? Gentle Snow was similarly shocked. She had previously been a first-rate guild's guild leader. Naturally, her information network was vast. She had also memorized most of the apex experts in God's domain. However, she had never seen such a powerful independent adventurer team. The most laughable part was that she didn't recognize a single player on that team. From what I can remember, the only adventurer team with this level of strength has to be Owl, the team that joined us in Titan City. When Aqua Rose saw this 20-man team, she could not help but recall Owl. In her opinion, Owl was one of the most powerful adventurer teams in God's domain. She had never imagined that she would encounter another team of such caliber. Guild leader, should we make their acquaintance? Independent teams were different from guilds. They might be able to recruit this adventurer team to Zero Wing. Even if they failed to do so, it wouldn't hurt to know such a powerful adventurer team. In the event that they needed more manpower in the future, they could request these independent players' help. After all, Apex experts were extremely rare in God's domain. Gentle Snow nodded in agreement. If they could recruit these players to Zero Wing, it would undoubtedly push the guild to a whole new level. They would also have more confidence in the contest on Thunder Island. Forget it. We have more important matters to deal with right now. We'll get acquainted with them if there is a chance in the future, Feng said, shaking his head. While this adventurer team might be foreign to Aqua Rose and Gentle Snow, Feng could not be more familiar with them. This adventurer team was the famous Midnight Tea Party. The team maintained a member count of 20 players. In terms of combat power, even super guilds feared them. However, as the Midnight Tea Party did not bother to claim territory of their own and refused to operate under anyone, the various super guilds had tried to recruit the team in the past. Unfortunately, no one ever succeeded. However, what surprised Feng was that he found a familiar face among the group. Endless Scars. Feng had never imagined that the once mythical existence would be a member of the Midnight Tea Party during God's domain's early stages. If the public had learned of this in the past, everyone would have been shocked. Impossible. Chapter 11-16. Quadruple Jackpot. There had been over 500 elite-ranked trolls on the battlefield. When they all died, a golden glow enveloped everyone on the team as they all leveled up. What astonishing leveling speed! Gentle Snow was flabbergasted as she watched her experience bar rise. When she had left White River City, she was only at 74% of level 41. To bridge the gap and reach level 42, she needed to grind for at least another full day or so, yet she had risen to level 42 shortly after entering the Crying Ghost Ridge. With this leveling speed, it was definitely possible to reach level 43 by the next day. After players reached level 40, it was practically impossible to level up once a day. No one would believe this. However, although the team had killed plenty of troll warriors, the loot was pitiful to say the least. Aside from some copper and silver coins, the 500 or so elite monsters only dropped some raw materials. Only 5 weapons and pieces of equipment dropped. Among them, 4 were level 60 common items, while the last was a piece of level 60 bronze equipment. However, Feng was not surprised. After reaching level 50, the drop rate for weapons and equipment decreased drastically. Only chieftain or above-ranked monsters had a slightly higher chance of dropping such items. This drop rate reduction occurred because players could begin challenging their Tier 2 class promotions after reaching level 50. After obtaining their Tier 2 class, killing elite monsters was as easy as taking candy from a baby. Tier 2 experts could solo chieftains and even give lords a run for their money. Generally, 2 or 3 Tier 2 experts working together could easily take down a lord of the same level. Naturally, the system wouldn't give players high-level weapons and equipment so easily. Hence, past level 50 6-man party dungeons, even in normal mode, usually had lords as the final boss. Moreover, these bosses had extremely powerful AoE skills. One mistake could easily lead to a party wipe. The same held true for Tier 2 experts. Adventurer teams and workshops that wanted to make money by selling weapons and equipment generally needed to deal with chieftains of the same level. If they wished to grind for mysterious iron equipment, at the very least they had to deal with lord-ranked monsters. This resulted in the rise in popularity for lifestyle classes capable of producing weapons and equipment. Of course, the system also restricted such lifestyle classes by significantly increasing the production costs of weapons and equipment that were level 50 and above. As a result, even bronze weapons and equipment required many rare materials. This greatly limited the number of weapons and equipment lifestyle players could produce and protected the market from oversaturation. This team is simply ridiculous. They have 4 people capable of using large-scale destruction spells in a 20-man team. Even our adventurer team only has 2 people with such spells. Is that swordsman an NPC? He can actually overwhelm 2 level 62 lords. Feng's performance had astonished the Midnight Tea Party's members. However, they weren't shocked because Feng had fought 2 level 60+ lords by himself. After all, they were capable of that themselves. What truly shocked them was the overwhelming strength Feng had displayed. The swordsman had managed to suppress the petrified trolls through brute force. Turtledove helped tank the petrified troll on Fire's side. Umian, lure one away from me. Everyone else prioritize killing the troll shamans. Feng ordered after sweeping a glance over the troll shamans, who had less than half their HPs remaining. Kola, start running. Lure the troll chieftain as far away from here as possible. Don't give the shamans any chance to heal the chieftain. Understood. Kola immediately dashed in the opposite direction of the troll shamans. Only large guilds had any chance of achieving this. Meanwhile, nurturing advanced appraisers was a benefit to a guild. In the past, guilds had normally only charged their members a quarter of NPC's appraisal fees, while non-guild members paid 3/4 of NPC prices. By doing so, guilds could make a fortune. NPC price for appraising a dark gold item was around 10 gold. For excellent dark gold items, the price was even higher. Even if guilds charged a lower appraisal fee with how many players there were in a guild, it would not be unusual to appraise several thousand items. Including the appraisal fees from non-guild players, a guild could easily make 200 or 300 gold a day. In the past, small guilds with only thousands of members dreamed of this kind of pure profit. Although Zero Wing still did not have any advanced appraisers, Feng possessed the omniscient eyes. Not only was the skill a very advanced identification skill, but it also served as an advanced appraisal skill. After a short moment, Feng finished appraising the remaining 19 items. What? Basic soul return actually dropped. Feng shouted in surprise after appraising the ordinary-looking skill book. Basic soul return. Doesn't that skill allow one to resurrect other players while in battle? Gentle Snow asked in shock. What? Guild leader, did it really drop? Aqua Rose looked at Feng excitedly, afraid that Feng was joking. Resurrection during combat would be a godly skill in dungeons. In dungeons, it wasn't uncommon for bosses to instant kill MTs due to mistakes. When such situations occurred, the entire team would die with the MT. However, if a team had basic soul return, they could resurrect the MT and continue the raid. This skill would undoubtedly reduce the unnecessary team wipes in dungeons. Take a look yourself, Feng said, nodding. He then shared the skill's information in the team chat. Basic soul return. Resurrects one player while in combat. Player resurrected will only recover 30% HP and 20% mana. Their death penalty will be halved. Cooldown 30 minutes. Class restriction: Cleric, Druid and Oracle. After everyone read the skill's introduction, excitement illuminated their expressions. What a godly skill. Previously, these players had only heard of skills that could resurrect players during battle. Now, not only was one such skill before them, but it could also reduce the death penalty. It was very common for players to die and lose a level when fighting a field boss. If they could reduce their death penalty by half and only lose 50% EXP, they could save plenty of time. What a pity. It would be great if the death penalty reduction were slightly higher, Cola said. Whether it was raiding dungeons or killing field bosses, MTs were the most susceptible to death. Following which, Feng shared the information for the remaining loot. The items were mostly level 60 weapons and equipment, with the best being secret silver rank. However, none of them could compare to basic soul return skill. Guild leader, should we search for another troll encampment? Minor Wind asked. Even after observing their surroundings for some time, he did not notice any signs of incoming monsters. It was likely that they had cleared out all of the nearby trolls. If they wanted to kill more, they would have to grind elsewhere. No. First, we need to greet our friends hiding in the distance, Feng said, shaking his head. He then turned to the dead forest on his left, shouting, "You've been watching for quite some time now. Why don't you come out and meet us?" Chapter 11-18. Reuniting with the Tea Party. Hellscythe _ Fluffy Goblin. Chapter 11-18. Reuniting with the Tea Party. Due to the quiet of the surrounding forest, the Midnight Tea Party's members heard Feng loud and clear. "Leader, we've been discovered. What should we do?" Cloud Yarn asked somewhat anxiously. It wasn't unusual to encounter other players in the fields. However, this situation was somewhat different. This was because they bore the suspicion of banditry. Feng's team had just finished killing multiple bosses. Although they had already obtained the loot, the items would remain ownerless for the next 2 hours. As long as they were killed, the loot was guaranteed to drop. Cloud Yarn did not doubt that Feng's team would be merciless to anyone who attempted to rob them. It wouldn't have been a major issue if Feng's team were only comprised of ordinary experts. However, based on the miraculous feats she had witnessed, Feng's team was most likely just as strong as theirs. If it really came down to a fight, the outcome wouldn't be pretty. Guild leader, could that guy be trying to trick us into revealing ourselves? We're so far away. How could he possibly discover us? Moreover, we're using isolation scrolls right now. If I were in his shoes, I wouldn't be able to discover us even with detection. How could a swordsman like him detect us? The Ranger Dark War said. Among the many classes in God's domain, the Ranger had the strongest perception abilities with both active and passive skills. Rangers were usually a team's eyes. Although the swordsman class was also an agility type class, it was not even a match for assassins, much less rangers. The rest of the adventurer team agreed with Dark War's words. Not only were their teams separated by such a massive distance, but the player that had called them out wasn't even a ranger. Moreover, they were also under an isolation scroll's effects. Feng might have shouted to see whether or not there were nearby players waiting to ambush his team. I don't think so. He's looking directly at us. Moreover, this is the Crying Ghost Ridge. This area is too dangerous for ordinary players, Endless Scars said confidently as she watched Feng, who stared straight at them. Big Sis Endless, what should we do? Should we just go over there? Cloud Yarn asked. What if those people misunderstand our intentions? Yarn, what are you afraid of? At most we'll have to fight them. We'll see who regrets their actions in the end, Netherworld said, wearing an eager expression. As an independent adventurer, his favorite hobby was to push his limits. Watching Fire Dance's performance had excited his will to fight. Wave is right. We're the Midnight Tea Party. Since when have we feared other players? Also, they have just finished an intense battle. They must have exhausted most of their abilities. If it really came down to a fight, they would be the suffering team. The other team members shared similar thoughts. Alright, enough. Let's go over and introduce ourselves. As for a fight breaking out, I don't believe that it's likely. Those players aren't fools. They should have noticed our presence long ago. Since we didn't try to attack them during a crucial moment, they should realize that we carry no ill will, Breezewine, the team's leader, explained. He then approached Feng's team. Giving the matter some thought, the Midnight Tea Party's members saw the reason in their leader's words. They then followed Breezewine. Meanwhile, after Feng announced the other team's presence, the rest of Zero Wings members followed his gaze. However, none of them noticed the silhouette or presence of other players. Snow, do you think the guild leader is being overly sensitive? Zhao Yueru asked softly after failing to find anybody in the forest ahead. Overly sensitive? Gentle Snow considered the possibility. After all, they had just finished a difficult battle. Even the best failed sometimes. They were also in a dangerous neutral map. A mistake wouldn't be unusual. However, as such thoughts began to sweep through the team, a blurry figure appeared from the dark forest ahead. Shortly after, more figures appeared. Zhao Yueru's jaw dropped as she turned to Feng in astonishment.